Chapter 1711. It is a good plan, but who can go to the Turks to carry out this plan? Li Zishuan's plan to divide the Turks was indeed a bright one, but Qin Xiong frowned and asked this question. After all, whether a plan was good or bad depended on the result, and the person who carried out the plan would have a direct bearing on the result. Li Er's face froze when he heard Qin Xiong's words. He clearly understood that a good plan was only half the success. The other half depended on the person who carried it out. Xu Bao is right. Li Zishuan, do you have a suitable candidate in mind? Li Er asked with a frown. Your Majesty, this little Xian is not familiar with most of the officials in court. He might not have a suitable candidate in mind. Before Li Zishuan could speak, Qin Xiong couldn't help but speak. To the Tang, the Turks were no different from a tiger's den. To have Li Zishuan recommend someone to carry out the plan to divide the Turks was clearly asking Li Zishuan to offend someone. If that person didn't return, that person's clan would probably view Li Zishuan as an enemy for generations. If that person was lucky enough to succeed and come back alive, he would be promoted. That person would not be grateful to Li Zishuan for his kindness. He would only be happy that he was quick-witted or lucky. This was a thankless task. Out of concern for the younger generation, Qin Xiong did not wish for Li Zishuan to answer Li Er's question. It had to be said that old Qin was truly treating Li Zishuan as his own nephew. Li Zishuan was not stupid. Although his EQ was not very high, it was definitely not low. In an instant, he understood Qin Xiong's intentions. He could not help but feel a trace of emotion in his heart. Back then, he had inadvertently cured Qin Xiong's old injury, but Qin Xiong had always treated him as his savior. Normally, he would protect him in everything. Whenever he encountered a problem, Qin Xiong would always be the first to stand up. This was the case when he had killed his way into the Bloodwind stockade alone. Half a month ago, it was the same when he had fought the Turkic army at Longmen Pass. Li Zishuan could only silently remember these sentiments in his heart. When the Qin family encountered difficulties and needed help one day, he would definitely provide assistance without hesitation. How could old Li not see through Qing Yaojin's intentions? His eyes flashed as he looked at Qin Xiong, who was bowing with his head lowered. A trace of understanding quickly flashed through his eyes. A moment later, he sighed and said, Xu Bao, how could I not think of the things you can think of? Don't worry, Li Zishuan's words today will only enter the ears of the four of us. There will not be a fifth person who will know. This was a guarantee to Qin Xiong. He guaranteed that the person recommended by Li Zishuan would not know that he was recommended by Li Zishuan. It was rare for an emperor to be able to do this. Qin Xiong was about to speak when Li Zishuan opened his mouth. He first clasped his hands towards Qin Xiong and said, Uncle Qin's good intentions, this nephew appreciates it. But this nephew only cares about the life and death of the Tang Empire. This nephew's recommendation to your Majesty today is completely out of the public interest. This nephew has a clear conscience. Finishing, Li Zishuan bowed towards Li Er and said, Your Majesty, this subject has a person in mind. He is the most suitable person to carry out this plan. I hope that your Majesty can consider it. Speak, Li Er hurriedly said, his voice carrying a trace of urgency. Duke Zhu Tang Jian. Under Li Er's aggressive gaze, Li Zishuan did not keep him in suspense this time. He directly said the most ideal person in his mind. It was the legendary person who had been sent to the Turks many times in history and almost lost his life in the grasslands, Tang Jian. Tang Jian's name was Mao Yu, and he was from Jinyang in Bing Province. In history, Tang Jian was one of the 24 meritorious officials of the Lingyan Pavilion. He was born in the first year of Xiang in the northern Zhou Dynasty and died in the first year of Xianqing in the Tang Dynasty. He had experienced 3 dynasties and 5 emperors and passed away at the age of 80. He could be said to be the old man of the officialdom. In his youth, Tang Jian's family had been officials for generations. His family was a famous family. It could be said that he did not get tired of using things and did not get tired of eating things. He received a good education and culture, and was raised to have an unrestrained and forthright personality. He was not a child who followed the rules. However, innate nature was innate and education was education. Tang Jian was extremely respectful towards his elders and was famous for his filial piety. Due to his father Tang Jian and Li Yuan being close, Tang Jian, who was older than Li Er by 20 years, had the chance to interact with Li Er and become friends despite the difference in age. At that time, the Sui dynasty was filled with rebellions and smoke of war rose everywhere. Tang Jian often discussed the world situation with Shimin and secretly reminded Li Er that the Sui dynasty was in chaos, and the world could be plotted against. Li Er, who had great ambitions, treated Tang Jian as a close friend and reported Tang Jian's words to his father. When Li Yuan heard this, he scolded Shimin not to speak nonsense. After that, he secretly summoned Tang Jian to the palace to discuss the world's situation. Therefore, Tang Jian could be considered as one of the earliest ministers to follow the emperor. In the 9th month of the 2nd year of Wuda, Tang Zuo was established. The country's foundation was not stable, and the world was still in chaos. Lu Wuzhou used Mai as a base and formed alliances with the Turks in the north. He sent troops down south to Taiyuan, where Li Tang and Long rose, drinking horses and drinking water from Fun River. Prince Jin, the third son of the new emperor Li Yuan, Li Yuanji, saw Lu Wuzhou coming fiercely. He abandoned Jinyang and fled to Chang'an. After Lu Wuzhou captured Taiyuan, he continued to lead his troops down south. Tang official Lu Chongmao occupied Xia County and gathered people to oppose the Tang, in response to Lu Wuzhou. At that time, Tang Jian was on a diplomatic mission and arrived at the army. Coincidentally, Li Xiaoji and the others were captured by Lu Wuzhou. Unfortunately, he was also captured. During the captivity, the resourceful Tang Jian, although he was trapped in the enemy camp, said, "I am the commander of the thieves, they are all mediocre. Only Yuqi Jingda is wise and farsighted." Thereupon he seized the opportunity to instigate Yuqi Jingda to rebel, advising him to choose a master and surrender to the Tang. Yuqi Jingda also knew that Lu Wuzhou would not be able to accomplish great things. Under Tang Jian's persuasion, body in Chao camp, heart in Han, he prepared to abandon Lu and surrender to the Tang. In the prison, Tang Jian and Yuan Junbao were locked in the same place. From Yuan Junbao's mouth, he learned about Duguan's rebellion. From time to time he also received news that Duguan had escaped back to Pudong to assume his original post. Tang Jian saw the situation was critical. He urgently asked Yuqi Jingda to release Lu Shirang and sent a message to the Tang camp. Under Qin Wang's urging, Emperor Gaozu was on his way to Pudong when he heard Lu Shirang's story. Thereupon he lured Duguan to kill him, and thus escaped from danger. Working together from inside and outside, Qin Wang Li Shimin defeated Lu Wuzhou. After returning to the capital, Tang Jian was appointed as the Minister of Rights, the Minister of Heavenly Policy Mansion, the Assistant Minister of the Yellow Gate, and was conferred the title of Zhu Guogong. The most legendary thing about Tang Jian was that he later went on a diplomatic mission to the Tujue. In the first year of Zhenguan, the Tang and the Tujue stopped fighting. Tang Jian was sent as a diplomatic mission to the Tujue to build peace. In the 4th year of Zhenguan, he sent as a diplomatic mission to the Tujue. Following the imperial court's mission, Tang Jian brought gold, silver, money and provisions to lure Xieli to surrender. Xieli saw that Tang Ri was powerful, plus he was very respectful toward the Tujue, hence he prepared to surrender to the House of Tang and slacked off on military defense. Right this moment, the Tang court sent Li Jing to launch a surprise attack, defeating the Tujue and quelling the danger of the northern border. Being in the hinterland of the Tujue, in the end, not only did they achieve their goal of luring Xieli to surrender, they were also able to escape on the eve of Li Jing's attack. Tang Jian's maneuver could be said to have reached perfection. Afterward, Tang Jian was also promoted as the Minister of Civil Affairs. His son and Princess Yuzhang became Phoenix Luan. The Taiyuan Tang family was not only a high official, but also a relative of the emperor. Henceforth, their glory reached the peak. It was precisely because Tang Jian had left such a thick and colorful stroke in the history books that Li Zixuan recommended Tang Jian to Li Zixuan. He believed that with Tang Jian's quick-wittedness and intelligence, he would definitely be able to successfully carry out the plan to divide the Tujue. This subject heard that Zhu Guogong Tang Jian went on a diplomatic mission to the Tujue last year. Regarding the environment and situation of the Tujue, Zhu Guogong is clearer than many ministers. In addition, that year when His Majesty defeated the rebel Lu Wuzhou, Zhu Guogong was in prison, yet he was still able to successfully instigate Uncle Yuqi, who was under Lu Wuzhou's banner, to rebel. This proves that Zhu Guogong's quick-wittedness and eloquence are exceptionally outstanding. How similar is the situation at that time to now? Therefore, this subject believes that with Tuli Khan as the foundation to instigate the leaders of the other tribes, sending Zhu Guogong is the most appropriate. Li Zixuan cupped his hands toward Li Er and said in a clear voice. Chapter 1712. Oh? You know Mao Yu? After hearing Tang Jian's name from Li Zixuan's mouth, Li Er could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. He even felt like he was suddenly enlightened. Based on personal ability and the current situation, Tang Jian was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate. However, although Tang Jian had been conferred the title of duke, he had always lived in seclusion. Li Er did not expect that Li Zixuan would have a connection with Tang Jian, so he could not help but ask, can I say that I know him from the history books? In the history books, before the great Tang destroyed the Turks, the person who sent the envoy to the Turks was Tang Jian. Li Zixuan had indeed never seen Tang Jian before. The two of them also did not have any interactions. Hearing this, he could not help but secretly roll his eyes and grumble in his heart. But these words could not be said out loud. In the face of Li Er's question, Li Zixuan did not blush, and his heart did not skip a beat as he made up a story. Your Majesty, this subject does not know Duke Zhu, but this subject has heard Uncle Yuqi speak of Duke Zhu's deeds. In addition, this subject recommends Duke Zhu out of righteousness and without any selfish motives. In the current situation, this subject believes that Duke Zhu is the most suitable candidate. After saying this, Li Zixuan's expression turned solemn as he clasped his hands and bowed solemnly to Li Er. Perhaps it was because of the solemnity on this fellow's face that Li Er believed his nonsense. Old Li furrowed his brows and fell into deep thought. On the side, when Qin Xiong and Qing Yaojin heard the name Tang Jian, their eyes could not help but light up. However, a hint of worry immediately flashed through Qin Xiong's eyes. After all, Tang Jian was a duke, a person of the same status as them. Moreover, this person, whether it was Li Yuan or the current Li Er, had a good personal relationship. If Tang Jian knew that the person who had recommended him to go to the Turks at this time was Li Zixuan, he would probably hate Li Zixuan to death in his heart. Although Li Zixuan's current divine favor did not seem to have any need to fear Tang Jian, who could say for sure about something like a divine favor? What if it was gone in the future? Li Zixuan had offended a duke for no reason at all, even though he didn't have the slightest benefit to himself. However, words that had been spoken were like water that could not be taken back. Qin Xiong could only wait anxiously at the side. While Qin Xiong was anxiously waiting and worrying, Li Zixuan finally spoke. He looked at Li Zixuan and said seriously, "Your plan is very good. The person you recommended is also very suitable. We will seriously consider it." After saying that, Li Er looked at Qin Xiong, who was sitting at the side with a worried expression but did not say a word. He immediately understood. He smiled and continued, "Shu Bao, don't worry about this brat anymore. What I said earlier still counts. What's more, Mao Yu is an open-minded person. He's not a petty person. Even if he knows, he'll know the severity of the matter. With Li Er poking at his heart, Qin Xiong could not help but blush. He hurriedly apologized. Your Majesty is the Emperor. Naturally, your words carry enormous weight. How would this old subject dare to doubt you? Li Er shook his head, not denying it. Cheng Yaojin grinned and said, He. Second brother, you don't mean what you say. But don't worry, even if Tang Mao finds fault with Xiao Xian after this, I, Cheng Yaojin, will not agree. I'm not afraid of him. This old fellow's mouth tore down Qin Xiong's stage. What a useless teammate. Qin Xiong glared at Cheng Yaojin. Li Er was already used to this and did not mind. He drank a cup of wine and looked at Li Zixuan. He asked calmly, Li Zixuan, when you go to the Black Armored Army tomorrow, have you thought about how to train this newly formed Black Armored Army? This was a small test for Li Zixuan. Other than having the right to supervise, the military registrar also had the responsibility to assist the general in managing military affairs. Li Zixuan said seriously, Your Majesty, I haven't thought about it yet. I've never been to the Black Armored Army's main camp, and have never seen the current Black Armored Army. Without seeing the actual condition of the Black Armored Army, if I rashly come up with a training plan for them, it would be no different from talking on paper. Only after seeing it with my own eyes can I formulate a training plan for them. This will allow this newly formed Black Armored Army to quickly adapt to the new equipment and allow them to quickly become a powerful force. Although it was a negative answer, Li Er nodded. He smiled and said, Good. If you can think this way, it proves that you're more mature than before. Then I can rest assured and let you go to the Black Armored Army. I only have one request. Within 2 months, let the Black Armored Army become the most outstanding of the 12 camps in the capital. Towards the end, Li Er's voice became extremely firm. If one were to ask who was the elder of elders in the Black Armored Army, that person would be none other than Li Er. Even Duan Zixuan couldn't compare to him. This was because the Black Armored Army was single-handedly created by Li Er. In the process of the Tang Empire's establishment, the Black Armored Army had followed Li Er through many battles. It could be said that Li Er's feelings towards the Black Armored Army were deeper than any other army. Therefore, in the battle 2 months later, Li Er had high hopes for the Black Armored Army. In the past, the Black Armored Army was the most outstanding army in the Tang Empire. It was an elite troop formed by the elites of the elites. However, during the rebellion in Guanqing, the 2,000 Black Armored Army members and the tens of thousands of troops from the Chui and Jing families met. That battle caused the Black Armored Army to suffer heavy losses. As a last resort, Li Er decided to reorganize the Black Armored Army and expand the Black Armored Army. It hadn't even been a month since the expansion of the Black Armored Army was completed. Even though those who were selected to join the Black Armored Army were all experts, they didn't have any cooperation with each other. Naturally, their fighting prowess wasn't as good as before. Right now, Li Er only wanted the Black Armored Army to return to its peak and continue its glory. Sensing the seriousness in Li Er's voice, Li Zixuan clasped his hands and said solemnly, Your subject obeys the decree. Your subject will do his best to make the Black Armored Army the most outstanding army in the Tang Empire. Naturally, Li Zixuan wasn't confident in his words. After all, whether it was in his previous life or this one, he had never led an army properly. Being entrusted with such an important task by Li Er without any experience, he naturally felt uneasy. But then again, since Li Er trusted him so much, Li Zixuan felt that there was no reason for him to disappoint Li Er. Besides, if he could train the Black Armored Army well, it would increase the chances of Tang Empire winning this war. All right. The meal has been eaten and the wine has been drunk. It's time for us to return to the palace. Hearing the affirmative answer from Li Zixuan, Li Er smiled with relief and then stood up. "Farewell, Your Majesty! Farewell, Your Majesty!" Qin Qiong, Cheng Yaojin, and Li Zixuan quickly stood up and bowed. Li Er waved his hands and left. Chapter 1713. After Li Er left, even though that old demon Cheng Yaojin was constantly making jokes on the side, the atmosphere at the table did not become lively again. Qin Qiong was still worried that Li Zixuan's plan to divide the Turks to Li Er would be known. At that time, it was hard to say what Tang Jian's attitude would be, but the entire Tang clan would definitely regard Li Zixuan as a mortal enemy. As for Li Zixuan, he was worried because he was going to start his life in the army tomorrow. After all, wherever there were people, there would be Jianghu. It was the same in the imperial court and the army. He did not know what awaited him next. Facing such an unknown fate, he could not help but feel a little lost. This was not as simple as solving a math or physics problem. It involved many people and matters. He himself was not sure if he would be able to live a smooth life in the army. "Uncle Qin, thank you for your hospitality today. I still have matters to attend to, so I will take my leave first." Many things happened during lunch. Although everyone did not eat to their heart's content, all good things must come to an end. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, they continued to chat for a while before Li Zixuan stood up and bid farewell. Good. Go ahead." Qin Qiong also knew that Li Zixuan would have many things to arrange before going to the army, so he did not urge him to stay. However, he still said, "Little Xian, since His Majesty has appointed you as an adjutant of the Black Armored Army, it means that His Majesty wants to cultivate your ability in war. You are the only child of your family. Logically speaking, His Majesty would not let you go to the front lines. However, the war with the Turks concerns the survival of the Tang Empire. You may not be able to avoid this war. It is also a good thing for you to gain experience in the Black Armored Army. In addition, you must be mentally prepared to go to the front lines. The medicine master is better than me and Jijie in terms of military strategy. Before you enter the army, you should pay him a visit. Speaking of which, you are considered relatives. I believe that he will not hide anything from you. If you can learn something from the medicine master, it may come in handy in the future." Hearing Qin Qiong praise someone like this, Cheng Yaojin was not unconvinced. Because that person was Li Jing, the Tang Empire's military god. In terms of military strategy, Li Jing's military talent was admirable. Old Cheng was no exception. Hearing this, Li Zixuan's heart skipped a beat. He originally wanted to go home directly, but after hearing what Qin Qiong said, he suddenly changed his mind. "Uncle Qin is right. I will go to Duke Wei's mansion to visit Uncle Li. Uncles, this nephew will take his leave." After bidding farewell to the two of them, Li Zixuan changed his route and went straight to Puning Lane, Duke Wei's mansion. Outside the mansion, Li Zixuan reported his name. The gatekeeper of Li Zixuan's mansion was shocked. He was about to go in and report, but he immediately put on a warm expression and welcomed Li Zixuan in. "Master has instructed that Marquis, you don't have to report your arrival. Go directly to the side hall for tea. Old Master is reading in the study room right now. I will go and inform Old Master." The gatekeeper enthusiastically led Li Zixuan to the side hall of Duke Wei's mansion. After asking the servant girls to serve him tea, he quickly ran out like a wisp of smoke. Why are the people of Duke Wei's mansion so polite to me? Could it be that Li Jing has divine foresight and predicted that I would come today? So he informed the gatekeeper in advance? That's impossible. The history books only wrote that Li Jing was a military god, but they didn't say that he was a swindler. Li Zixuan, who was sitting on the chair, was not in the mood to taste the fragrant tea. Instead, he muttered to himself. The atmosphere in the mansion was a little too strange. It was true that he was related to Li Jing, but it was far from being to this extent, right? Just as Li Zixuan was puzzled, light footsteps came from outside the door. Li Zixuan frowned, because the footsteps did not sound like it came from a man, but more like a woman. As expected, in the next moment, a graceful woman wearing a red dress walked in. Li Zixuan's heart thumped, and he knew that it was not good. Because the person who came was Hong Funu. Li Zixuan deeply remembered that when the bearded man first came to Cloud Mountain to show off, he was beaten to a pulp by him and Mo Huai. After that, Hong Funu killed her way to Cloud Mountain and almost fought with her life. If not for Li Jing stopping her, a great battle of the century would probably have broken out on Cloud Mountain. So when he saw the unreasonable Hong Funu again, Li Zixuan immediately had the urge to flee. I was wondering who it was. So it's you. When Hong Funu saw Li Zixuan, she did not glare at him angrily, nor did she speak sarcastically. Instead, she revealed a trace of kindness on her face. She walked towards Li Zixuan with a smile and said, "Tsk, I heard that you fought with the Tuju estate preceptor in the north and did not die. Little Xian, grandmother really underestimated you. But you were able to not lose to Wu Jie, which can be considered as helping your brother vent his anger. Hee. How is it? Have you eaten yet? If you haven't, grandmother will ask someone to prepare some food and wine for you. Oh, if you haven't eaten yet, grandmother will personally prepare food and wine for you." The more Hong Funu spoke, the happier she became. In the end, she could not help but pat Li Zixuan on the shoulder, with a look of, "I'm giving you face, you have to accept it. Many thanks for grandmother's kindness. It's just that I've already eaten before coming here." Li Zixuan shuddered and hurriedly stood up from the stool. He cupped his hands and said. At the same time, he seemed to understand something in his heart. It seemed that the reason why Hong Funu was so friendly to him was mainly because of the bearded man. That night, when Yun Shan was attacked, the bearded man had no choice but to fight Wu Jie head-on. In the end, if it were not for little Yu Er's timely arrival, the bearded man's head would have been separated from his body. With Hong Funu's temperament, if she heard that the bearded man was beaten up, she would probably want to capture that person and torture him to death with a knife. After that, Li Zixuan happened to meet Wu Jie at the Dragon Gate. Although he did not defeat Wu Jie did not gain any advantage over him either. It was probably because of this incident that Hong Funu's attitude towards Li Zixuan changed greatly. "Have you eaten? That's not important. You can have another meal after you've eaten. Grandmother will ask someone to prepare a table of good wine and dishes for you. Later, Brother Jing will accompany you to drink a few cups." Li Zixuan's guess was right. The reason why Hong Funu's attitude towards him had changed greatly was mainly because Li Zixuan had fought Wu Jie alone at the Dragon Gate. Although he did not seriously injure Wu Jie, he had still injured him and helped the bearded man vent his anger. It was not a joke to say that the Feng Chen three heroes were of the same breath and branch. Cough cough. Alright. Chu Chen, don't make things difficult for little Xian. De Jian is looking for you in the front yard. Quickly go out and take a look. Just as Li Zixuan was at a loss, Li Jing finally arrived. He coughed dryly and said to Hong Funu, "De Jian? What could he possibly want from me?" Alright. Brother Jing, you can chat with little Xian. I'll go out first." Hong Funu pouted unhappily, then turned around and left. Chapter 17-14. Xiao Xian, what brings you to Chang'an today? I heard that your Yanwang College has been busy with recruiting students. It seems like you've finished your work, right? Duke Wei's mansion, side hall. After Li Jing sent away the nonsensical Hong Funu, he invited Li Zixuan to sit down. After exchanging some pleasantries, Li Jing went straight to the point and asked Li Zixuan why he was here. Li Zixuan cupped his hands and replied, "Uncle Li, I've finished my work at the college. In addition, the 5,000 sets of new armor that His Majesty had ordered the workshop of the interesting pavilion to make have been completed. Therefore, I plan to head to the Black Armored Army camp tomorrow to take up my post. I'm here today to inform General Duan in advance, so I came to visit you. Actually, he was here today to learn from Li Jing, but how could he say such things so bluntly? He, Li Zishuan, still cared about his reputation. But then again, his relationship with Li Jing was a bit messy. According to his relationship with Han Yushi, he should call Li Jing granduncle. However, this way, Li Jing would be a generation older than Qin Qiong and Qing Yaojin. This was because Li Zishuan usually called them uncles, but now he called Li Jing granduncle. What was going on? Therefore, ever since he found out that Han Yushi's father, Han Tianhu, was a descendant of Han Qinhu, one of the 8 pillar countries of the former Sui dynasty, Old Qing had emphasized to Li Zishuan more than once that he could not call Li Jing granduncle. Oh? 5,000 sets of weapons and armor? How did your workshop finish making them so quickly? When Li Jing heard this, his eyes flashed and he could not hide the shock on his face. As the Minister of War, Li Jing was not only proficient in leading troops to war, but he also had a good understanding of weapon manufacturing. He knew that according to the plate armor style that Li Zishuan had shown in front of the civil and military officials, there were no more than 5 workshops in the Tang Dynasty that could make such exquisite plate armor. Including the Ministry of Works and the Works Supervisor, there were no more than 5. Even if the Ministry of Works and the Works Supervisor worked together, it would be impossible for them to create 5,000 sets of such armor in a month's time. How could Li Zishuan not be surprised that Li Zishuan's interesting pavilion workshop did it? Yes, thousands of craftsmen, working day and night, finally succeeded. Li Zishuan nodded calmly. Others only knew how amazing this speed was, but they didn't know how much the workshop had paid for this speed. Even though Li Zishuan's family was extremely wealthy, creating these 5,000 sets of armor was still a huge blow to his vitality. After all, if he wanted to achieve such a fast speed, he needed enough skilled craftsmen. If he wanted to motivate the craftsmen to produce, he had to give them enough wages. However, the only fortunate thing was that the iron and vanadium used to make the weapons and armor were all dug out from the mines. Li Zishuan had a few mines in his hands. In terms of raw materials, he only had to pay the miners' wages and the cost of transporting the ores. Otherwise, just these 5,000 sets of armor would be enough to empty his family's fortune. Making weapons was really too expensive, especially in ancient times where there was a shortage of iron. However, even though he had spent a lot of money to make these 5,000 sets of armor, Li Zishuan didn't regret it. Because to him, money could be earned again, but if the country was gone, it would be useless no matter how much money he earned. Good, good, good. Hearing the affirmative answer, Li Zishuan nodded repeatedly. He smiled and said, Xiao Xian, these armor of yours came at the right time. Xieli in the north is making a move. I'm sure you've heard about this, right? Now that the Tang Empire and the Turks are at each other's throats, the sooner you can make the armor, the sooner the newly formed Black Armored Army can be formed. I've already heard about the movements of the Wolf tribe in the north. That's why I'm in such a hurry to go to the army camp. Li Zishuan nodded and said, Xiao Xian, not only are you strong in martial arts, but you're also meticulous. In fact, not only Jijie and Shu Bao, even I have always wanted to transfer you into the army. However, you're Jingma's only son, so I can't bear to do that. Now that the Tang Empire is in danger, and you've coincidentally become the Black Armored Army's commander, I think it won't be long before you shine in the Tang Empire's military. Li Zishuan pondered for a moment and looked at Li Zishuan with a serious face. He wasn't deliberately flattering Li Zishuan. A person with unparalleled martial arts could become a fierce general. However, in addition to unparalleled martial arts, this person also had unparalleled wisdom and meticulous thinking. With a little training, this person would definitely have the chance to become a one-in-a-million good general. And Li Zixuan was such a person. A master of the Grandmaster realm and the head of the engineering school. Wasn't that the perfect combination of martial arts and wisdom? Uncle Li, you're too kind. Hearing this, Li Zixuan hurriedly cupped his hands and said, although I'm strong in martial arts, I've never led an army to war before. How can I deserve such praise from Uncle Li? Li Zixuan looked at Li Zixuan meaningfully and smiled faintly. Of course you deserve it. I also believe that my judgment is not wrong. If you don't believe me, then let's wait and see. Li Zixuan laughed dryly and didn't continue the conversation. Li Zixuan was silent for a moment and said, leading an army to war requires actual combat experience, but this experience can be cultivated later. In these years, I've followed His Majesty to fight in the north and south. I've experienced at least 800 battles, if not 1,000. I have some understanding of the art of war and strategy, but I don't know if you'd like to listen to my nagging. Li Zixuan was delighted. He hurriedly stood up and bowed to Li Zixuan solemnly. He said, Uncle Li, what are you talking about? You're the invincible war god of the Tang Empire. It's my honor to be able to listen to your teachings on the art of war. If I hadn't been apprenticed when I was young, I would have been willing to serve you as a teacher. Seeing Li Zixuan's attitude, Li Zixuan felt gratified. In fact, he had never intended to accept any disciple. His position in the military was too high. He only wanted to live a secluded life and not get involved in politics to reduce the suspicion of the emperor. Therefore, he had never thought of accepting any disciple. However, Li Zixuan was too outstanding in both martial arts and literature. It was hard not to love him. In addition, Li Zixuan was his junior and relative. Under such circumstances, Li Zixuan couldn't help but want to teach Li Zixuan something. The generals of their generation would eventually grow old. He hoped that Li Zixuan could shoulder the heavy responsibility of making the Tang Empire prosper in the future. Haha. You don't have to be so serious. I can't teach you anything too profound in such a short time. I'll just teach you some superficial things so that you can have a general understanding of the military drill of the Tang Empire. Li Zixuan stood up and helped Li Zixuan up. He said with a smile. Chapter 1715. Duke Wei's Mansion. Li Jing's lecture lasted all the way until dusk. He spoke very quickly, and Li Zixuan, who had strong mental strength, digested it very quickly as well. It was so fast that even Li Jing could not keep up with Li Zixuan's speed. This was really a strange thing. A teacher's lecture speed could not keep up with the speed at which a student digested the knowledge. This was really unheard of. Initially, Li Jing only wanted to talk to Li Zixuan about the current structure of the Tang army, the main generals in the army, and the military formations that were often used during military drills. He did not expect Li Zixuan to understand it on the spot. He only hoped that after Li Zixuan entered the Black Armored Army's camp, he would be able to slowly digest these things through his daily training. After all, Li Zixuan had never been in the army before, nor had he ever led an army before. Even if he was extremely talented, it was impossible for him to digest so much military knowledge in such a short time. But who knew that Li Zixuan, who had never come into contact with military formations before, would be able to digest the knowledge that Li Jing taught him even faster than some of the veteran generals who had been in the army for years. Sometimes, Li Jing only needed to talk about the general rules of a certain military formation and the principles of cooperation, and Li Zixuan would be able to draw inferences from it. Moreover, some of the unintentional words that came out of his mouth would make Li Jing's eyes light up. As a result, the class, that was supposed to last until dusk, was finished by the time it was 5 in the afternoon. Furthermore, Li Zixuan, as a student, was able to digest the new knowledge better than he had expected. Left with no choice, Li Jing could only increase the learning content for Li Zixuan. He personally went to the study room and took out a stack of unbound manuscripts. Then, he began to talk to Li Zixuan again. What he had taught Li Zixuan previously was only the surface of the art of military formations. But in this stack of manuscripts, it was the essence of the art of military formations. These were all summaries of Li Jing's military experience over the years. Its value was absolutely immeasurable. Li Zixuan explained the contents of these manuscripts slowly. In the process, he would often intersperse some of the wars he had experienced before. The purpose of this was to combine theory and practice so that Li Zixuan could better understand them. Li Zixuan was also having a great time listening to them. After all, 9 out of 10 men were military fans. It was a rare opportunity to listen to a military lecture from the great Tang army god. Such an opportunity was hard to come by even in 10,000 years. In terms of teaching skills, although Li Jing was not as good as the gold medal lecturers in modern schools, Li Jing's understanding of military formations was unparalleled. Every word he said hit the nail on the head, making people involuntarily think and comprehend. All right. It was getting late. Little Xian, you should go back. Otherwise, when the city gates close, it won't be easy for you to leave the city. When the sun was setting, Li Jing collected the scattered manuscripts on the table, then stood up and said to Li Zixuan, who was sitting opposite him. There was a trace of tiredness on his face. Teaching for half a day had exhausted his spirit. It was really because Li Zixuan, this student, was absorbing new knowledge too fast. As a teacher, he had been tense and did not dare to relax for a moment in order not to drag him down. Now that he was finally liberated, Li Jing could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He could not help but sigh inwardly. Teaching a disciple is really tiring. Under normal circumstances, half a day could not teach or learn too much. However, the two people in front of him, one was the invincible god of war, the other was a genius with a photographic memory. In half a day, the two of them had completed the cultural inheritance that would take others more than 10 days to digest. At this time, Li Zixuan stood up and bowed respectfully to Li Jing. He said, "Uncle Li's teaching today is very likely to save the lives of many other soldiers on the battlefield in the future. I will remember your life-saving grace in my heart." Li Jing's military lecture today was extremely important to Li Zixuan. He was going to the military camp tomorrow, but before that, he knew nothing about the military. He didn't even know about the job structure in the military, let alone the military drill method of this era. Although he was a modern person and knew some of the training programs of the modern army, through watching TV or military training, it was absolutely impossible to forcibly transfer the modern set over. Every era had its own characteristics. If he forcibly forced the things of another era into this era, there would definitely be a problem of acclimatization. But now, after experiencing Li Jing's teaching, the situation was completely different. Although he had not completely grasped the essence of Li Jing's military strategy, at least he now had a good understanding of the system and basic military formation in the Tang army. When the time came, he could formulate a set of specific training system according to the military formation training method of this era, and there would not be a problem of acclimatization. In addition, through this afternoon's lecture, Li Zixuan had a general understanding of the military rules in the Tang army. In this way, when he entered the military camp in the future, he would not inadvertently violate the military rules. He did not like to have his weakness in the hands of others. "Ha! Little Xian, your words are too serious." Li Jing waved his hand and said, "The art of war exists in the heart, and the actions are more important than the reason. The so-called art of war can only allow you to understand the deployment of various military formations and battlefield strategies, but the situation on the battlefield is constantly changing. Blindly imitating the art of war is not advisable. Since you have received my teachings on the art of war, you are half a disciple of mine. This old man does not want you to become that armchair strategist Zhao Kuo, who brings disaster to the country and the people. You must remember what this old man has said today." Li Jing's face was filled with solemnity. Although he had great military achievements in his life and was revered as the war god of the great Tang by the people, he had never formally accepted a disciple. On one hand, he wanted to keep a low profile, and on the other hand, he did not want to have a half-baked disciple like Zhao Kuo, who would bring disaster to the lives of the soldiers. Hou Junji was not Li Jing's disciple yet. Li Zixuan clasped his hands solemnly and said, "This nephew will remember Uncle Li's teachings. I will not become that armchair strategist Zhao Kuo." After a few moments of hesitation, Li Jing reluctantly handed the pile of manuscripts on the table to Li Zixuan and said, "These manuscripts are some of the insights this old man has gained about the art of war while following His Majesty. This old man has named it the Mirror of Six Armies. Although it has not been completed yet, it should be of some help to your current situation. Take it back today, and have someone copy it before returning the original manuscript to this old man." Mirror of Six Armies. It was actually the Mirror of Six Armies. In history, the Mirror of Six Armies was the first book written by Li Jing that gathered the essence of the art of war, but for some reason, it was lost. Li Zixuan did not expect Li Jing to pass such a precious book on the art of war to him. It seemed that today's trip was not in vain. "Many thanks to Uncle Li for passing this book on the art of war to me." Li Zixuan was overjoyed as he hurriedly received the book with both hands. Chapter 1716. Li Zixuan was in a good mood as he held the Mirror of Six Armies that Li Jing had given him. This was Li Jing's masterpiece in the art of war. Although there were many military books in this era, such as Sun Tzu's The Art of War, they had to keep pace with the times. Although Li Jing's Mirror of Six Armies was better than Sun Tzu's The Art of War, the content of the Mirror of Six Armies had definitely absorbed the wisdom of the ancestors and combined it with the current military system and formations of the Tang Empire. Therefore, the Mirror of Six Armies was more suitable for this era. Li Zixuan, who was in a good mood, rode Whitey out of Chang'an City quickly. He had to get to the workshop before the end of the day and ask the craftsman to make a copy of the Mirror of Six Armies. This military book was too important. Before he left, Li Jing had repeatedly warned him not to reveal it to anyone else. The art of war was not something that could be easily imparted, because if someone with evil intentions learned it, it would be a disaster for the country and the people. If not for the fact that Li Zixuan was a promising talent, that Li Zixuan was humble, adept in both the pen and the sword, and that Li Zixuan was half a relative of his, and that the Turks and the Great Tang were at daggers drawn and a war could break out at any time, he would never have taught Li Zixuan the Mirror of Six Armies at this time. Therefore, Li Zixuan would not let anyone else make a copy of the Mirror of Six Armies. He had to keep an eye on it himself. Marquis. His Highness Prince of Wei is looking for you everywhere. It seems that there is something urgent. Not long after leaving Chang'an City, a middle-aged man riding a horse came up to him. When the man was about to reach Li Zixuan, he steadied his horse and dismounted. He bowed to Li Zixuan with his fists clasped. Jia Yi, why is Qinke looking for me?" Li Zixuan narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice. The person who came was Du Yi. After the Heavenly Dragon sect was annihilated, Venerable Du Yi was taken in by Li Zixuan as a servant. In order to avoid causing panic in his family, Li Zixuan changed Du Yi's name to Jia Yi. After a long time, he got used to calling him Jia Yi and not Du Yi. Counting the days, Du Yi had been a servant of the Marquis's household for nearly half a month. During this time, Li Zixuan had probed Du Yi many times, intentionally or unintentionally. However, he found that the other party seemed to have accepted his fate and did not have the slightest intention of rebelling. Thus, Li Zixuan gradually relaxed his guard against Du Yi. However, even so, Li Zishuan did not dare to let Du Yi stay in the Marquis's mansion all the time. Usually, Du Yi spent more time in the Yunshan courtyard. Mo Huai, a master at the late stage of the Grand Master realm, was guarding the Yunshan courtyard. Even if Du Yi had the intention of rebelling, he would not be able to make any waves. In any case, Li Zishuan did not dare and would not risk his family. He was rarely in the Marquis's mansion, so he would not leave Du Yi alone in the Marquis's mansion. Du Yi used to be a monk. However, after becoming Li Zishuan's servant, in order to avoid attracting strange gazes when he went out, he usually wore a silk scarf hat outside. He looked a bit like a barbarian from beyond the Great Wall. In the face of Li Zishuan's inquiry, Du Yi shook his head and said, "I don't know. Half an hour ago, the King of Wei went to the academy to look for the Marquis. When he found out that the Marquis was not on Cloud Mountain, he ordered this penniless monk to head down the mountain to look for the Marquis. Prince of Wei only said that he had something urgent and wanted you to go back to the workshop as soon as possible." Li Zishuan's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that there was a new development in the steam engine research? He nodded at Du Yi and said, "That's good. Let's go back to the workshop as soon as possible." He had originally planned to go to the workshop to make a copy of the military book. Now, he could solve Li Tai's problem along the way. Thus, the master and servant rode 2 horses and galloped wildly on the official road, splashing up a lot of smoke and dust along the way. "Young master, you're finally here. Prince of Wei and Faubert are at the steel mill. You should go quickly." As soon as they arrived at the workshop, Song Xiaoxi came up to them and said hurriedly as he helped Li Zishuan lead the horse. "Okay." Since they had already arrived at the workshop, Li Zishuan didn't ask for more details. He would know what happened in a moment anyway. He was about to step into the workshop when he suddenly stopped and turned to Song Xiaoxi and said, "Song Xiaoxi, I'm sorry. Xiaoxi, go to the editing department and ask the craftsman who is in charge of making a copy to not leave work yet. I have something to ask him." Although Li Tai's matter was important, making a copy of the military book was also very important. The contents of the military book might save his life on the battlefield in the future. "Yes, young master." Song Xiaoxi responded and then went to lead Big White to the stable in front of the workshop. There was high-quality horse grass there. Li Zishuan then walked in through the door. "Marquis, I will wait for you outside." Du Yi cupped his fists and said. Ever since he became Li Zishuan's servant, he hadn't really entered the workshop. He knew that Li Zishuan's most important secrets were hidden inside. Although he was curious, it was only curiosity. He didn't have any other improper thoughts. Li Zishuan frowned. After a moment, he said, "It's fine. Come in with me." Du Yi was not only a person with strong martial arts, but he was also quick-witted and had many tricks up his sleeve. If this kind of person could be loyal, Li Zishuan felt that he could be of great use. Therefore, he did not mind giving Du Yi more temptations to test him. Du Yi was stunned when he heard this. He probably did not expect Li Zishuan to take the initiative to invite him into the workshop. However, while he was still in a daze, Li Zishuan had already walked in. He quickly responded, "Yes, Marquis." After saying that, he hurriedly followed them in. "Qinke, why hasn't the leaf turned yet?" "Soon. It should be soon. Steward Zhang, get someone to make the fire bigger and pump more air into it. Let the water boil faster." "All right." When Li Zishuan walked into the steel mill, he heard the voices of Li Tai, Faubert, and the rest. The atmosphere seemed to be heavy. He looked around and saw a huge cylindrical furnace standing in the middle of the yard. The furnace's surface had gears and connecting rods and other transmission mechanisms. At the end of the furnace was a generator made by the workshop. A few shirtless blacksmiths were blowing air into the furnace. Although he could not see the flame, Li Zishuan could feel a wave of heat hitting him in the face. "It's moving! It's moving!" It's spinning. And it's getting faster and faster. Success. We've succeeded. At this moment, the connecting rods drove the gears, and the gears drove the generator's wheels to turn. The people in the yard suddenly cheered. No one noticed Li Zixuan's arrival. Du Yi widened his eyes and looked at the huge machine in disbelief. He clearly did not see anyone exerting force on the machine, but how could the machine turn on its own? Could this be the magic of immortality? Thinking back to the magic of immortality that he had performed on the streets of Chang, and in order to bewitch the people, Du Yi's face could not help but burn. Compared to this, the magic of immortality that he had performed before could only be regarded as child's play. Ha ha! Good, good, good! Qingke, you've finally succeeded. The Tang Empire and even the whole world will completely change because of your invention. When Li Zixuan saw that Li Tai's steam engine test was successful, he could not help but clap his hands and laugh excitedly. Chapter 1717. There was no doubt about the steam engine's role in promoting the development of human society. It was the most important symbol of the replacement of handicraft labor by large-scale machine production. Perhaps Faubert, Zhang Hongxing, Li Tai, and the others in the workshop did not realize the great value of the steam engine, but as a modern man, Li Zixuan knew very well that this thing was enough to change this era. In the past, he invented the Datang daily, the immortal chariot, the curved plow, the water wheel, and other things. Perhaps they caused the wheel of history to deviate slightly from its original trajectory, but the appearance of the steam engine was very likely to cause history to be completely different from what was described in the history books. Yamacho, you're finally here. Hearing Li Zixuan's voice, Li Tai, who was in a state of great excitement, turned around and saw Li Zixuan standing at the door of the courtyard, looking at him with a smile. Li Tai was excited and complained a little. Speaking of which, after the first steam engine was built today, he had originally planned to invite Li Zixuan over to test it himself. However, whether it was in Lantian County or Yunshan, he could not find Li Zixuan. Seeing that it was getting late, he could only bring people over to test it. When Li Zixuan explained the principle of the steam engine to him, he told him that if the design of the steam engine was not reasonable, it would be easy to cause a road cavity explosion during use. Little Fatty cherished his life, so he wanted Li Zixuan to come over and take charge. But after waiting for a long time, Li Zixuan did not come, so he could only take the risk and try it himself. Fortunately, there were no major problems in the end. I went to Chang'an City today for some business. If I had known that you were going to test the steam engine today, I wouldn't have stayed in Chang'an City for so long. Li Zixuan walked to Li Tai, patted the latter's shoulder with a smile, and explained a little. Then he said, "Ha ha! You did a good job, Qingke. This steam engine is stable and can drive the generator at a constant speed, which proves that you've succeeded. Congratulations! You've completed a magnificent invention. The millions of people of the Great Tang will remember you, and your name will definitely appear in the history books." Li Tai also felt that he was very amazing to have achieved great success on his first attempt at building a steam engine. However, after hearing Li Zixuan's praise, he felt a little embarrassed. He scratched his head and said, "Yamacho, Tai only built a steam engine. How can millions of people in Tang remember it? And it will be written in the history books? Aren't you exaggerating?" Although the rest of the people didn't say anything, they had a look of deep understanding on their faces. Obviously, they were like Li Tai, not realizing the huge change that the steam engine could bring to this era. Ha ha! Not exaggerating. Not exaggerating at all. In about a year, you will understand that what I said today is not an exaggeration at all. Li Zixuan smiled mysteriously, and then he looked at the steam engine and the transmission mechanism outside. Although this thing was running normally now, it did not mean that there were no hidden problems. He had to check it carefully. Seeing Li Zixuan's serious tone, Everyone subconsciously believed his prediction. Li Tai shook his head and said, Yamacho, even if the steam engine is really so important, the person who will be recorded in the history books should be you, not Li Tai. All the blueprints for the steam engine came from Shanzhong. Tai was just following the blueprints and drawing according to the blueprints. The credit of inventing the steam engine is not mine. As Li Zishuan inspected the steam engine, he smiled faintly and said, imitating a gourd requires skill. Some people try to imitate a tiger but end up looking like a dog. Compared to them, Qingke, you're much better. Also, it is not easy for you to build a steam engine in such a short time. The success of the steam engine belongs to all of you. As for me, it is better if I don't have this false reputation. While they were talking, Li Zishuan had already checked all the details of the steam engine and transmission mechanism. He nodded with satisfaction again and said, there should be no problems. Just follow this prototype and make a few more. Then, Qingke, you can go to Bing Province and Yunzhou. At this point, Li Zishuan turned around and looked at Faubert, Zhang Hongxing, and the others. With a serious expression, he said, Faubert, Qingke is going to Bing Province and Yunzhou to build telegraph relay stations. This is a very important matter. Everyone in the workshop must do their best to assist Qingke. Whatever he needs, the workshop will build it for him as soon as possible. This is an extremely urgent matter. Faubert had never seen Li Zishuan speak of something so seriously. Hearing this, he couldn't help but become serious. He cupped his hands and said, Young master, don't worry. Everyone in the workshop will work together to assist King Wei. Li Zishuan nodded. He then looked at Li Tai and said, Qingke, during your trip to the north, you must ensure that the telegraph relay stations are built as soon as possible and pay attention to your safety. Bing Province is fine, but Yunzhou is located at the northern border of the Great Tang. I'm afraid that there might be some unforeseen circumstances, so before you leave, you must ask His Majesty to send an army to escort you. In addition, Qing Chumo and the others should be almost done with their final exams. When the time comes, let Qing Chumo and Iron Egg go north with you. Master has to go to the barracks tomorrow morning, so I can't go north with you. Take care of yourself. In the past, Li Zishuan wouldn't be so long-winded. However, from what he learned in the House of Chang and today, the secret war between the Great Tang and the Turks had already begun. The two countries' intentions for war were clear as day. It was just that the two countries weren't fully prepared yet. Under such circumstances, if the Turks knew that King Wei of the Great Tang was going to the northern border, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't come up with some bad ideas. Li Tai cupped his hands and replied, Yes, Yamacho. You take care too. Gugu. After saying that, Li Tai's stomach made a strange noise. Li Zishuan couldn't help but say, You haven't eaten yet, right? Hurry up and eat, don't starve. Xiaoxi, go to the cafeteria and ask them to prepare some delicious food. Everyone has been working hard to build the steam engine these days. Yes, young master. Song Xiaoxi nodded and hurriedly ran off to pass down the order. At this time, Zhang Hongxing cupped his hands and said to Li Zishuan, Marquis, the 5,000 sets of vanadium steel horse lances, vanadium steel plate armor, and vanadium steel horse armor that you requested have all been completed. They are all stored in the warehouse of the workshop. I have checked them one by one. Would you like to take a look now? Li Zishuan pondered for a moment and waved his hand. Since you have already checked, I won't take a look. With you in charge, I can rest assured. Tomorrow morning, this Marquis will bring people here to collect the armor. He still had to make a copy of the military book. As for the armor and weapons, he had already taken a look at some of them a few days ago. Since Zhang Hongxing said that there was no problem, then there should be no problem. Good. Then I will wait for Marquis to collect the armor tomorrow. Chapter 17-18. Little Yu, it's already so late. Why haven't you gone back yet? After telling Li Tai about going to the north to set up a telegraph, Li Zixuan went straight to the editorial department of De Tang Daily. At this time, the editorial department was still lit up, the workshop had already been electrified, and it wouldn't be long before most of Lantian County would be electrified. When Li Zixuan walked in, he saw little Yu sitting on a chair and flipping through something. She was so focused that she didn't even notice that someone had come in. Li Zixuan couldn't help but quietly walk up to her and said, "Mister, you're here." Hearing the familiar voice, little Fishy was shocked. She quickly put down the document in her hand and stood up, saying, "Little Four came over earlier and said that you had something important to make a copy of. I thought that since it was something important, it wouldn't be appropriate to leave it to the craftsman. It just so happens that I'm also very familiar with our movable type printing method, so I stayed and waited for you." "You little girl." Li Zixuan shook his head and laughed. "This kind of work should be left to a reliable person. You're a little girl. If you don't go back at this time, wouldn't it be unsafe to walk at night?" Li Yu didn't care and said, "What's wrong with that? Lantian County is Mister's territory. The law and order here are very good. Could it be that there are criminals? Besides, I went to investigate the county magistrate of Hua County by myself. Didn't I come out unscathed?" Hearing this, Li Zixuan couldn't help but stare at Li Yu angrily and said, "You little girl still have the nerve to say that. If she didn't mention this to me a few days ago, I wouldn't even know about it. Although you're a gold medal reporter personally appointed by the Emperor and can supervise all illegal things in the world, if you went to investigate the county magistrate alone, what would you do if the other party became desperate and killed you to silence you?" In fact, ever since Li Yu was given the title of a gold medal reporter, she was not honest at all. This girl would often mingle in the streets and restaurants. Whenever she heard of corrupt officials or illegal activities, she would either arrange for someone she trusted to investigate in secret or disguise herself and investigate on her own. A few days ago, after Li Yu returned from the north, he heard that the people of Hua County were unable to receive any relief food. After the locust plague, the imperial court distributed a certain amount of relief food according to the severity of the disaster. When Li Yu heard this, he didn't know where he got his courage from. After a little preparation, he actually went to Hua County alone to secretly investigate. Fortunately, the county magistrate of Hua County wasn't very vigilant. After Li Yu's identity was exposed, the Hua County warden decisively sided with Li Yu. That was how Li Yu was able to find out that the county magistrate of Hua County had embezzled disaster relief food and escaped unscathed. Li Zixuan had also heard about this matter 2 days ago when he was chatting with Han Yushi. At that time, he was really worried for Li Yu. He secretly wondered why this little girl was so bold. She always did things that ordinary people couldn't do. Cough, cough. "Mister, please don't mention this matter anymore. Aren't I fine now?" Although Li Zixuan's tone was strict, the care and love in his words couldn't be concealed. Li Yu's heart was warmed, but she still acted coquettishly. She quickly changed the topic and said, "Oh right, mister. Don't you have something to make a copy of? Quickly give it to me. I'll go and arrange it for you." Although Li Zixuan knew that Li Yu was deliberately changing the topic, he still took out the 6 armies mirror from his chest and handed it to her. He said, "There's a lot of content. I estimate that you'll be done by midnight. After you're done, don't go back to the county. Go directly to Yunshan Courtyard. It's been empty recently. Ever since the Marquis residence in Lantian County was built, the Li family's Yunshan Courtyard was rarely used. Even so, there were still maids taking care of and tidying up the place every day." Li Yu was delighted when she heard this, but she said, Mister, this isn't good, right?" Li Zixuan said unhappily, "What's not good about it? But you're going back to the county in the middle of the night. Even if you don't meet any bad people, if you fall into a ditch, you won't be able to call for help. From the workshop to Yunshan Courtyard, there are street lamps all the way. There won't be any accidents. Li Yu smiled and said, "Thank you, mister. Then I'll go make a copy of the book." After that, Li Yu took the 6 armies mirror from Li Zixuan's hands and went out the door. Looking at the girl's energetic back, Li Zixuan shook his head helplessly. However, looking at Li Yu's state today, it seemed that she was slowly getting used to the position of the editorial department's supervisor. A few days ago, Ma Zhou went to Qingzhou to take up the position of the provincial governor. The entire editorial department's heavy burden fell on Li Yu's shoulders. At first, Li Zixuan was worried that this girl wouldn't be able to handle such a huge pressure. However, after Ma Zhou left, the Tang daily editorial department had been operating normally without any problems. This meant that Li Yu was slowly able to control this huge mess. In the editorial department, Li Zixuan looked at the manuscripts on the various desks, as well as the previous issues of Tang Daily. Only then did he leave with his hands behind his back. After leaving the workshop, he rode on to Bai and returned to the Marquis residence in Lantian County. "Husband, you're back? I'll go prepare some food for you." When he returned to the Marquis residence, the sky was already dark. Seeing that Li Zixuan had returned, Han Yushi quickly went up to him and said, "Li Zixuan came back too late, so no one waited for him to have dinner together." Li Zixuan said casually, "No need to trouble yourself. Let the kitchen maid heat up the dinner. I'll just eat whatever I want." Han Yushi frowned. However, seeing that Li Zixuan was so insistent, she couldn't persuade him. She could only let Xiao He instruct the kitchen. After a while, the dishes were served. Li Zixuan picked up his bowl and started eating without caring about his image. This was only when they were a couple. When there were other people present, he still had to be careful about his image as Marquis. Han Yushi supported her chin and looked at the man in front of her without blinking. Although the way this man ate was not elegant at all, it didn't hinder her from liking him. She secretly thought that this was what it meant to be real and not fake. Anyway, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Li Zixuan is the best no matter what. Han Yushi knew that Li Zixuan would leave Lantian County tomorrow to take up his position in the Black Armored Army. Therefore, in these last few hours, she couldn't bear to look away from Li Zixuan. "Ahem. What's wrong, wife? Didn't your husband wash his face this morning?" Feeling Han Yushi's gaze, Li Zixuan couldn't help but touch his face and look at Han Yushi. Chapter 17-19. In the side hall of the backyard, Han Yushi couldn't help but burst into laughter when she saw Li Zixuan touching his face in embarrassment. However, her smile quickly disappeared. She looked at Li Zixuan and said, "Husband, don't you know if you washed your face this morning? I just feel that I can't get enough of your face." Oh my, once this woman learned how to say sweet nothings, she could simply be so sweet. Li Zixuan instantly felt that the fragrant food in his mouth had turned into a sweet and greasy taste. He quickly wiped his mouth and said, "Cough, cough. I didn't expect that my wife's sweet nothings would be no weaker than my husband's." What Han Yushi said just now was just that she couldn't help herself. At this moment, she knew that she had misspoken and couldn't help but blush. She glared at Li Zixuan and said, "Husband, you're talking nonsense." "I didn't." In order to prevent his wife from being embarrassed, Li Zixuan laughed and waved his hand. "Ha. Alright. Your husband is full. Wife, get someone to clean up. It's getting late. We should wash up and rest." Li Zixuan especially emphasized the word wash. This guy's lecherous heart was simply self-evident. Han Yushi's face instantly turned even redder, so red that water was about to drip out. She felt even more shy, especially when she thought of last night's situation. Fortunately, after Li Zixuan said this, he directly went to the side room with his hands behind his back. Otherwise, Han Yushi really didn't know how to continue this conversation. It was the last night before the young couple parted. There was no need to say more about the craziness. At midnight, the storm suddenly stopped. These two people didn't sleep, but leaned against the bed and actually started talking about things. Wife, after I leave tomorrow, I'll leave this huge Marquise estate to you to take care of. Father, Mother, and Faubert will help you with the affairs of the estate, so I'm not worried. I'm mainly worried that there will be people with evil intentions outside the estate who will take advantage of the situation to harm the people in the estate. Therefore, I won't bring any of the guards with me this time. They will all stay behind to protect the safety of the Marquise estate. During this period of time, the family will try to reduce the number of times they go out alone. The two brothers, Lu Yun and Lu Feng, were both from the Imperial Army. They were skilled in martial arts and each of them was capable of fighting against 10 experts. However, Lu Feng had escorted Ma Zhou to Qingzhou a few days ago. Even so, Lu Yun alone was more than enough to ensure the safety of the residents. Although Fei Ji's martial arts are not as good as Lu Yun's, he has followed me for the longest time and is the most trustworthy. Furthermore, he is meticulous in his thinking. The guards of the Hou Fu can be assigned to him. Wife, you must learn how to use these people well. Li Zixuan held Han Yushi with one hand and said slowly. He wasn't making a big fuss about the safety of the family in the estate, but he felt that it was necessary to take precautions. Especially after the incident of the academy being attacked, Li Zixuan felt that when he made decisions in the future, he couldn't be careless. Otherwise, the people around him might lose their lives because of him. Han Yushi understood Li Zixuan's feelings. She nodded and said, This concubine will remember everything that my husband has said. I'll take good care of father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, and Lan. I won't let them meet with any danger. This was a promise and a responsibility. As his wife, although she couldn't share Li Zixuan's worries in official matters, she could help Li Zixuan take good care of the family. Otherwise, Li Zixuan would be distracted by family matters. It's been hard on my wife. Li Zixuan sighed and said. He knew that he shouldn't have placed all of his family's affairs on a woman, but the current situation forced him to temporarily leave this small family and strive for a stable environment for the other great family to develop. If the great Tang wasn't surrounded by powerful enemies like the Turks, Li Zixuan would be willing to give up his position and peacefully accompany his family every day, living the life of a wealthy man. It's not hard on me. Husband, you're the one who's working the hardest. At this moment, Han Yushi raised her head and looked steadily at Li Zixuan. She said, This concubine knows that husband's heart is not only concerned about our small family, but is even more concerned about the lives of the common people and the survival of the country. This concubine does not ask that husband can stay by this concubine's side forever. I only ask that husband can protect himself when you are outside. To this concubine and my parents, husband is the sky of this family. This silly woman, although she didn't talk much, she would always be the one who understood Li Zixuan the most. Hearing this, Li Zixuan couldn't help but pull Han Yushi into his arms and hug her tightly. He sighed and said, You know me best, my wife. However, your husband isn't as great as you think. Your husband doesn't have great ambitions. I only want to be by your and my parents' side every day. But without a big family, how can there be a small family? If we don't take care of the Turks, the Great Tang will never be at peace, and the people of the Great Tang will always have a sword hanging over their heads that could fall at any moment. In this situation, how can our families live happily together? So it's not that your husband has great ambitions, but that I'm forced by the situation. Han Yushi looked at Li Zixuan lovingly and said, Husband, why do you have to belittle yourself like this? This concubine likes a husband like you. It was said that the men of the Gu family were the cutest. Some men might be conferred the title of Marquis, Prime Minister, and Minister, but they might not be good husbands, good sons, or good fathers to their families. Han Yushi felt that Li Zixuan was quite good like this. Ha ha! Li Zixuan smiled. He stroked Han Yushi's back and suddenly thought of something. He said, "Oh right. If I remember correctly, Renbiao and Li Jingqiu should be getting married soon, right? Renbiao is my good brother, and Li Jingqiu is my adopted sister. I'll have to trouble my wife to send a congratulatory gift to Qizhou." Han Yushi knew a little about Wang Renbiao and Li Jingqiu. Hearing this, she nodded and said, "This concubine understands. I'll go and arrange it tomorrow." Li Zixuan responded. He suddenly felt a wave of tiredness. After all, it was already early in the morning. Thus, he patted Han Yushi's back and said, "It's getting late. Wife, let's rest." "Husband, wait." Han Yushi suddenly sat up. She was a little shy but also a little anxious. Li Zixuan couldn't help but be confused. Han Yushi stretched out her wrist and said softly, "Husband, help me take my pulse." "Take your pulse? Take what pulse? Wife, where are you feeling unwell?" Li Zixuan heard this and was even more confused. Han Yushi lowered her head and said softly, "This concubine feels that after these 2 days, our concubine seems to be pregnant. Husband, your medical skills are excellent. Can you take my pulse?" Li Zixuan almost fainted when he heard this. "Wife, aren't you being too impatient? Even if we do that, we might not be pregnant. Even if we are pregnant, it's impossible to show a pregnancy pulse so quickly, right?" Chapter 17:20. Husband, it's 5:30. It's time for you to wake up. The next day, before dawn, Han Yushi propped herself up and nudged Li Zixuan, who was sleeping soundly beside her. Last night, she, who was eager to have a child, had pestered Li Zixuan for who knows how many rounds. Li Zixuan was a martial arts grandmaster after all, so his physical strength was limitless. She, on the other hand, could not do the same. She felt weak all over and was too lazy to even move a finger. Even so, she still relied on her strong willpower to wake up on time and wake Li Zixuan up. This was because Li Zixuan had told her yesterday that the Black Armored Army would be calling for soldiers at 7 in the morning. Li Zixuan had to be there on time with the armor and equipment. "Oh, let me sleep for a while more." Li Zixuan, who was sleeping, turned over and mumbled. Then, he went back to sleep. Although he was a Wu Dao master was still human. After doing so many things, he would still feel tired and sleepy. "Husband, it's 5:30 already. If you don't wake up now, you won't be able to make it to the military camp before 7 in the morning." Han Yushi felt helpless. Although Li Zixuan's tired expression made her heart ache, she didn't dare to let Li Zixuan delay such important military matters. "Oh, military camp? It's 5:30 already?" Li Zixuan finally woke up. He opened his eyes and climbed out of bed. Thank goodness for you, my wife. Otherwise, I would have overslept." As he spoke, Li Zixuan had already lifted the blanket and jumped out of bed to get dressed. This was his first day at the military camp. He didn't want to be late. Wouldn't that be handing his weakness to the enemy? Besides, in his previous life, Li Zixuan didn't like to be late. It was a matter of personal habit. "Husband, let this concubine help you dress." Han Yushi used all her strength to get up, but she forgot that she was only wearing a very thin gauze dress. This movement almost made Li Zixuan unwilling to get out of bed again. "Ahem. Wife, don't move. You'd better have a good rest. I'll wear it myself." Li Zixuan coughed and quickly pressed Han Yushi down. Then, he got out of bed and went to get dressed. Since he was going to the military camp, he naturally had to wear armor. Li Zixuan was wearing the military uniform given to him by the imperial court and not the latest plate armor made by the workshop. That thing was too troublesome to wear. If one's body wasn't flexible enough, one person probably wouldn't be able to do it. Even if his body's flexibility was perfect, if he wanted to wear the new plate armor made by the workshop, he wouldn't be able to do it without a cup of tea's time. When Han Yushi was pressed down by Li Zixuan, she knew that she had just walked. She, who was more shy, used the blanket to wrap her body. Looking at Li Zixuan's heroic appearance in armor, the admiration in her heart couldn't help but grow stronger. It was said that a man in a military uniform was the most charming. The style of the Tang Dynasty's armor was very heroic and domineering. Of course, the most important thing was that Li Zixuan was born handsome. Now that he was wearing armor, he would definitely charm a lot of young ladies when he walked outside. How could Han Yushi be an exception? Hey! I didn't expect it to fit so well. This saves me a lot of trouble. Li Zixuan moved his arms and couldn't help but sigh. Then, he walked to the bedside and looked at Han Yushi on the bed. He said, "Wife, I'm going to the military camp. Stay at home and take good care of your parents. You also have to take good care of yourself. Understand?" Chapter 1721. I didn't expect you to think so highly of Li Zixuan, Erlang. In the bedchamber, after Li Er finished speaking, Empress Zhongsun couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This child has only returned to Chang'an for a little more than a year, but he is already in the court and has been conferred the title of Marquis. Sometimes I am really curious how spiritual master Ling Su trains his disciples to actually produce such an outstanding person like Li Zixuan. Empress Zhongsun couldn't help but associate Li Zixuan with her own children. After all, in terms of age, Li Zixuan wasn't much older than Li Chengqian and Li Tai. A trace of doubt flashed through Li Er's eyes. He had only heard of spiritual master Lingshu from Baiqi's intelligence, but had never seen him in person. Hearing Empress Zhongsun sigh with emotion, he couldn't help but be curious about spiritual master Lingshu's methods of teaching his disciples. Haha! Li Zixuan is indeed talented, but Chengqian, Xiaoke, and Qingke aren't bad either. Chengqian is now conscientious and is learning how to manage government affairs from me. In time, when I grow old, Chengqian will certainly become a wise ruler. Xiaoke is dedicated to managing the Yanwang Bank. Yesterday, he came to me to ask for people, saying that he wants to set up a department called the Gold-Clad Guard in the bank to supervise the illegal matters within the bank and to protect the bank's safety. If the bank can really become orderly under his management, then my Tang Empire will be able to recreate a super golden age no less than the Qin Emperor's Hanwu era. Qingchue's grades are among the best in Yanwang College, and her achievements in engineering are comparable to several of the college's discipline leaders. Now, she has become the deputy chief designer of the second and third trump card projects of Yanwang College, leading the advancement of these two projects. Yesterday, I heard people say that Qingke has successfully built the first steam engine in the workshop of the interesting pavilion. I heard Li Zixuan mention this before. It is a good thing. It was rare to hear Li Er ramble on about such trivial matters, so Empress Zhongsun listened very patiently. But when she heard about the steam engine, she couldn't help but interrupt. "Your Majesty, what is this steam engine? How is it a good thing?" Li Er smiled mysteriously and said, "Ho-hu." In Li Zixuan's words, the steam engine is a power machine, a machine that uses fire to generate power. It can be used to drive generators to generate electricity or other machines to work. It's truly convenient. It's hard to imagine how prosperous our great Tang would be if this machine could replace human labor on a large scale. Empress Zhongsun opened her small mouth in surprise. Using fire to generate power? The Cyan Sparrow can actually create such a miraculous thing? At this moment, Empress Zhongsun was only short of saying, "Is this still my son?" She found it hard to imagine that the child who only knew how to fight for his parents' favor not so long ago had now become a master of engineering and created such a wonderful product. The change between before and after was really too great. Haha. Maid Guanyin, don't underestimate Qingke. I can see that as long as this child uses his intelligence in the right place, no one can compare to him. Li Er smiled proudly. Then, he looked at the sky outside the window. He stood up and said meaningfully, "All right. It was almost time for the morning assembly. There are some things that I should tell everyone in the court." Empress Zhongsun quickly stood up and said, "I will dress your majesty." Although she was the mother of a nation, in front of Li Er, she always regarded herself as his wife. Things like serving Li Er and dressing him, she would usually do it herself and never let anyone else do it. This was already a tacit understanding between husband and wife. "Hongxing, have all the armors and equipment been loaded?" At the new workshop of the Strange Taste Pavilion, although the sky was not yet bright, it was already in full swing. Dozens of craftsmen were moving goods back and forth. Li Zixuan, dressed in military attire, found Zhang Hongxing and asked, "Marquis, all the armors and equipment have been counted. In half a cup of tea's time, they will all be loaded onto the carriage." Zhang Hongxing bowed and cupped his fist. Although Li Zixuan had just arrived at the workshop, the craftsmen were already busy, especially Zhang Hongxing. He did not even go home last night. This morning, he had already gotten up before dawn to arrange for the craftsmen to count the armors and equipment and load them onto the carriage. After all, it was 5,000 sets of armors and equipment. It would take a lot of time just to count them, let alone load them onto the carriage. When Li Zixuan arrived at the workshop, there was already a long line of carriages in front of the workshop. They were all carriages that specialized in transporting goods. "Good. Thank you for your hard work, Hongxing." Li Zixuan patted Zhang Hongxing's shoulder and said. In fact, he did not tell Zhang Hongxing to do these things in advance. It was Zhang Hongxing who took the initiative to do them in advance. If it were not for his subordinates who were so easy to deal with, he might not have been able to reach the barracks on time today. "Hey, this is nothing. It's not hard at all." Zhang Hongxing waved his hand and shook his head with a smile. "Sir, your things." At this moment, a crisp female voice rang out. Li Zixuan turned around and saw Li Yu holding a black package and walking towards him quickly. Li Zixuan went forward and received it with both hands. He opened the package and saw 2 stacks of manuscripts lying quietly inside. One stack was unbound and was obviously Li Jing's original manuscripts. The other stack was bound and even had an exquisite craft paper cover. It was obviously Li Yu's masterpiece. "This girl is quite meticulous," Li Zixuan praised in his heart. He then looked at Li Yu and smiled. "Good. Little Yu, thank you for your hard work. You must have slept very late last night, right?" Although Li Yu's face could not hide her tiredness, she still smiled sweetly. "It's okay, sir. It's not hard for little Yu to work for you." Compared to the help Li Zixuan gave her, what she did was insignificant. Li Yu had always been grateful to Li Zixuan. "You little girl." Li Zixuan shook his head helplessly and said, "Go back and rest after you've given the orders to the editorial department today. It's easy for girls to get wrinkles if they stay up too late." Li Yu wrinkled her nose and whispered, "I won't get wrinkles." Zhang Hongxing walked over and cupped his fist. "Marquis, all 5,000 sets of weapons and armor have been loaded. There's a total of 100 carriages. Do you want to check?" Li Zixuan perked up and waved his hand. "No need. I'm not worried about you. After I leave, Hongxing, help Faubert with the workshop. He's old now. Try not to let him tire himself out." Zhang Hongxing cupped his fist. "I understand. Marquis, don't worry." Li Zixuan nodded and looked at Li Yu. "Little Yu, I have to go to the barracks. Take care of yourself. If there's anything, send me a telegram." Li Yu took a deep look at Li Zixuan and cupped his hands as a disciple. "Take care, Mr. Li Zixuan made a sound of acknowledgement and then shouted to his bodyguards, "Move out! Destination, Chang'an City." Chapter 1722. At Li Zixuan's command, more than 100 carriages set off at the same time, heading straight for Chang'an. 5,000 sets of armor, and these were the most advanced weapons and armor in the world. Both Li Zishuan and the imperial court attached great importance to this. Li Zishuan had taken more than half of the personal guards of the Marquis's residence with him today, and more than 100 soldiers of the imperial army at the foot of Cloud Mountain had also been transferred over to accompany Li Zishuan in escorting these weapons and armor to Chang'an. Although the folk customs of the Tang Empire were open and chivalrous, and the imperial court did not explicitly forbid scholars and chivalrous men from carrying swords or other weapons, the imperial court would never allow the weapons and armor made by the new workshop of the interesting pavilion to fall into the hands of the common people. This was because the new weapons and armor were simply too formidable. Just imagine, if someone were to obtain a set of vanadium steel armor, a vanadium steel horse lance, and a vanadium steel horse armor, wouldn't that person become an invulnerable Iron Knight who could charge through anything? Such a person would definitely be able to casually charge into the local government of a small province or county, creating a very unstable factor for the Great Tang's common people. This was just like how many countries in modern society ban firearms. To this era, the weapons and armor created by the workshop were no less dangerous than firearms in modern times. Hiya! Li Zishuan rode at the front of the long procession on Da Bai's back. He was dressed in military attire and looked extremely handsome, just like a general who had just returned from a victorious battle. Thankfully, it was still early and there weren't many people on the road. Otherwise, who knew how many young girls would be mesmerized by his handsome appearance? Li Zishuan didn't have time to think about such frivolous matters. At this time, he was thinking about his next plan. Although he hadn't wanted to go to the army and suffer, what was done couldn't be undone. Moreover, the Great Tang and the Turks were at each other's throats, so he truly did have a responsibility to join the army and contribute to the country. In this situation, he had already calmly accepted the difficult life that awaited him. In addition, for some reason, when he thought about personally experiencing the military life of the Tang dynasty, Li Zishuan felt a sliver of anticipation in his heart. While drunk, I look at swords under the lamp. In my dreams, I blow the horn at the barrack. 800 li of troops under the scorching heat, 50 bowstrings overturning the sound beyond the Great Wall, the soldiers of autumn on the battlefield. In the past, Li Zishuan had only experienced the thrill and excitement of ancient battlefields through poetry. Now that he was personally going to the military camp, and in the near future, he might personally go to the battlefield, how could he not be excited? Especially in this life, he had been practicing martial arts since he was a child. Now, he was already a Wu Dao master. It was said that those who were skilled were bold. In his previous life, every time he saw the military parade of his motherland on TV, he had an impulse to join the army and serve his country. However, at that time, his body was not strong. He was in a subhealthy state where he was panting after running 2 laps around the field. He definitely could not endure the hardships of being a soldier, so in the end, he gave up. But in this life, not only did he have the heart, but he also had the ability. He wanted to use his abilities to make some contributions to the people who were suffering in this era. After all, he was a descendant of Yan Huang. Wait! Yamacho, wait for us! While he was deep in thought, Li Zishuan suddenly heard someone calling him from behind. At first, he thought it was an auditory hallucination, but after a while, the voice behind him became clearer and clearer. He finally couldn't help but turn around. He saw 2 funny teenagers, riding 2 bicycles, rushing towards the convoy. It was Ching Chumo and Yuchi Baolin. Lu Yun, Feiji, you guys take the convoy and leave first. I'll be right behind you. Li Zishuan frowned and said to the people around him. Chapter 1723. Old Master, Chon Yo is doing well in Yunshan. Why did you let him join the black armored army? In Chang'an City, Madame Sun couldn't help but ask as she helped Qing Yaojin put on his court robes. After Li Zixuan left the Qin manor yesterday, Qin Xiong and Cheng Yaojin discussed and decided to send their younger generation to the Black Armored Army's camp. However, Qin Xiong's son, Qin Huayu, only studied poetry and didn't know any martial arts. Obviously, he couldn't be sent to the army. In the end, Cheng Yaojin called Yuqi Jingda and the two old fellows went to the palace to ask for an official position for their son. At this moment, hearing his wife's question, Cheng Yaojin couldn't help but glare and say, "Madam, don't you know whether that brat is good at studying or not? It's better to let him get the last place in Yunshan and embarrass his father than to let him go to the army camp and earn some military merit. That way, when his father rises to the heavens, this brat won't starve to death on the streets." Speaking of which, from the start, Cheng Yaojin didn't expect Qing Chumo to have any achievements in literature. As long as Qing Chumo didn't always get the last place and embarrass him, it would be fine. The reason why he let Qing Chumo go to the mathematics school was mainly because Cheng Yaojin had already seen that Li Zixuan was not a fish in a pond. Among the younger generation in Chang'an City, Li Zixuan was the only one who could convince Cheng Yaojin in terms of martial arts and talent. It was said that when one sees a worthy person, one should emulate the worthy. Having met such an outstanding young man like Li Zixuan, Cheng Yaojin naturally wanted his son to be influenced by Li Zixuan and cultivate their relationship. Cough, cough, of course, this relationship was only brotherly. In the future, when their generation grew old, Ching Chumo would have a capable brother to rely on. Old Ching wouldn't be worried, right? This couldn't be considered as using. To be precise, it was an investment. Ching Yaojin had long seen the potential in Li Zixuan and had long invested in Li Zixuan, this potential stock. Bah! Bah! Old thing, what nonsense are you spouting so early in the morning? When Sun Shi heard this, her eyebrows raised. She could not help but pinch the soft flesh on Cheng Yaojin's waist as she reprimanded. She couldn't be blamed for being unreasonable. It was just that Cheng Yaojin's words were really asking for a beating. "Ioyo, madam, let go. Old Cheng won't say anything." Cheng Yaojin could not help but grimace in pain as he hurriedly begged for mercy. "Humph. Let's see if you dare to spout nonsense in the future." Madam Sun glared at Cheng Yaojin. The latter gasped and rubbed his old waist, not daring to say anything harsh. After a while, Madam Sun asked doubtfully, "Master, since you want Chon Yo to join the army, why don't you let him join the Right Guards? This way, it'll be convenient for you to take care of him." Cheng Yaojin was not only the High Duke of Lu, he was also the General of the Right Guards. In the Right Guards, Cheng Yaojin's words could be said to be absolute. What Madam Sun meant was very simple. That was to let Ching Chumo become a soldier under Cheng Yaojin. With Cheng Yaojin taking care of him, Ching Chumo would not be bullied in the army, right? It was said that mothers loved their sons the most. How could Madam Sun be an exception? Her mentality was in line with the majority of mothers in the world. After listening to Madam Sun's nagging, Cheng Yaojin's mouth twitched but he did not reply. Madam Sun waited for a long time but did not hear a reply. She could not help but pinch Cheng Yaojin again and said angrily, "I'm talking to you, are you listening?" This time, Cheng Yaojin was prepared. He nimbly avoided Madam Sun's killing blow and said, "Didn't you not let me speak just now? Now that I'm not speaking, you're blaming me. You're really unreasonable. You. When Madam Sun heard this, she was so angry that she wanted to die. Seeing this, Cheng Yaojin quickly waved his hand and said, Madam, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. It's almost morning court. If I'm late, Wei Zheng, that old thing, will impeach me again. I'll take my leave first. After saying this, the old man adjusted his belt and hurriedly rushed out of the door. Chapter 1724. Haha. Finally, I don't have to study in the academy anymore. In my opinion, Xiao Xian, you should go to the Black Armored Army as soon as possible. That way I can follow you to the barracks. On the official road from Lantian County to Chang'an City, the convoy escorting the new equipment was moving forward quickly. Qing Chumo and Yuchi Baolin were riding the workshop's most advanced speed-changing bicycles, sandwiching Li Zixuan in the middle. The three of them walked side by side at the front of the convoy, making the entire convoy look a little strange. However, Qing Chumo didn't care about this at all. At this moment, he was holding the handle of the bicycle with one hand and waving his right hand as he laughed loudly. Yanhuang College usually implemented strict military management of the student. Not only were there many rules in the academy, but students were also not allowed to go out during normal teaching period. Most importantly, the competition between the students in the academy was very fierce. Qing Chumo, the underachiever, had enough of it. Although the students in the academy were still very friendly with each other, it was very easy for him to accidentally score last in every exam. If he were to score last in the exam, he would definitely be beaten up when he returned home. His skin was thicker than others, but he couldn't stand being beaten up every day. Actually, if the exam wasn't a factor, Qing Chumo still liked the life on Yinshan Mountain. Now that he was able to leave the academy temporarily, this guy was like a tiger that had just been released from a metal cage. He couldn't help but want to roar 3 times to the sky. "You rascal, you can't wait to leave the academy?" Li Zixuan, who was riding on Big White's back, couldn't help but glance at Qing Chumo and say, "Hee, you can't say that. Staying in the academy is actually quite fun, as long as there are no exams. Xiao Xian, you know that I'm not cut out for it." Qing Chumo was still holding the handle of the bicycle with one hand and scratching his head with the other as he laughed foolishly. This guy had obviously practiced his driving skills on the way to the north to kill the locusts. Hearing this, Li Zixuan couldn't help but roll his eyes. He was too lazy to deal with this useless person. Actually, as to why the two brothers, Qing Chumo and Yuchi Baolin, would suddenly follow him to the black armored troops, he had just pondered over this question for a moment. He more or less understood Qing Yaojin and Yuchi Jingda's intentions in making such an arrangement. Regarding this, he only felt gratitude towards these two old generals. After all, with Qing Yaojin and Yuchi Jingda's current position in the imperial court, no one in the military dared to touch their sons, not even Qiu Xingong. This could be considered as a safeguard for Li Zixuan. After entering Chang'an City, you two will give up the bicycle and ride horses instead. As for your car, I'll get someone to send it back for you. Otherwise, how can you go to the barracks like this? After a moment of silence, Li Zixuan instructed Qing Chumo and Yuchi Baolin. Yeah. Yuchi Baolin was more obedient and nodded in agreement. On the other hand, Qing Chumo was unconvinced. What's wrong with riding a bicycle to the barracks? The Tang Empire's military regulations don't say that riding a bicycle to the barracks isn't allowed, right? This fellow didn't like riding a horse when he went out anymore. He was already used to riding a bicycle. Li Zixuan glared at this fellow and said unhappily, "Then when we go to war, do you also ride a bicycle? If I tell you to ride a horse, then ride a horse. The military isn't like other places. When you go to the barracks, don't be unconventional and cause trouble. Otherwise, I'll get someone to send you back to the academy." Hey. Don't. Xiao Xian. I'm just joking with you, don't take it seriously. Please don't take it seriously. If you want to ride a horse, then so be it. It's not like I don't know how to ride a horse. Iayeo, F***ck, save me. Upon hearing this, Qing Chumo was shocked and hurriedly waved his hands. What a joke, it wasn't easy for him to leave the academy. How could he bear to go back? However, in a moment of panic, when he waved his hands subconsciously, both his hands left the handlebars. The bicycle instantly lost its balance, and went straight towards the farmland by the side of the road. Whoa! Where did all these carriages come from? Why are there imperial guards escorting them? What's in these carriages? When Li Zishuan and the rest arrived at Chang'an City, the city gates were already open. The carriages entered through the Yanqing Gate and went straight towards the Black Armored Army's barracks in the northwest of the city. Along the way, the huge carriages naturally attracted the attention of countless passers-by. Under normal circumstances, those who could wake up so early were mostly peddlers who entered the city to sell their goods or commoners who entered the city to buy things. The huge carriages caused them to discuss animatedly. However, although these people were curious about the armored soldiers beside the carriages, they could only shrink back and point at them from afar. The general in the lead looks like the Marquis of Yong'an. What? The Marquis of Yong'an? Why did the Marquis of Yong'an bring so many soldiers and carriages to Chang'an City? Who knows? Could it be that the imperial court is sending the Marquis of Yong'an to suppress bandits? Nonsense. Now that the world is peaceful, where would there be so many bandits to suppress? Besides, the Marquis of Yong'an isn't a general. Why would he lead soldiers to suppress bandits? That's true. But why is the Marquis of Yong'an wearing a general's uniform? About this. It had to be said that the people of Chang'an City were quite familiar with Li Zishuan. There were very few people who had never heard of Li Zishuan, and there were even more who had seen Li Zishuan with their own eyes. As such, among the pedestrians on both sides of the road, there were people who quickly recognized Li Zishuan. Li Zishuan naturally didn't have the time to care about these people's discussions. This was because there was only 15 minutes left before the Black Armored Army's barracks were called. In order to avoid being late, he could only speed up the carriages. Luckily, there weren't many people on the streets of Chang'an City early in the morning, and there weren't any traffic jams. Of course, speaking of this, it was all thanks to the widespread use of bicycles. Whether it was the civil and military officials or the common people, they were used to riding bicycles instead of horse carriages for short journeys. Otherwise, there would still be traffic jams on some of the key streets of Chang'an City. This was because this was the time when the civil and military officials left their homes to rush to the palace for the morning court. If it was in the past, every official would take a horse carriage to attend the morning court. It would be strange if the streets weren't congested. Who are you? This is the Black Armored Army's barracks. Unauthorized personnel are not allowed to enter. Finally, Li Zishuan arrived at the Black Armored Army's barracks before the 7 o'clock hour. This was a hilly wasteland in the northwest corner of Chang'an City. Inside the barracks, there were several large and small white tents, and one could vaguely see groups of fully armed soldiers. When the two soldiers in front of the barracks saw Li Zishuan, they hurried forward to stop him. Li Zishuan flipped off his horse and said loudly, "I am Li Zishuan, the Black Armored Army adjutant appointed by the Emperor. Today I am officially here to take up my post." Chapter 1725. You are the Marquis of Yong'an? In Chang'an, in front of the Black Armored Barracks, the two guards were shocked when they heard Li Zishuan's identity. Although there were many people in Chang'an who had seen Li Zishuan, these two guards were not among them because they were in the army all year round. Not only them, but less than 10% of the soldiers in the barracks had seen Li Zishuan, but more than 90% of them had heard of Li Zishuan. Therefore, after knowing Li Zishuan's identity, the two guards were so surprised and excited. After all, Li Zishuan was a marquis at a young age, a Yamacho from Yanhuang College, and the first person to kill locusts. With so many halos around him, Li Zishuan was now considered a celebrity in the Tang Empire. Li Zishuan nodded. Seeing that the two guards were very enthusiastic after knowing his identity, he smiled and said, "Maybe you can call me adjunct." The two guards looked at each other and quickly bowed with cupped fists. "Greetings, Sir Adjunct." The news that Li Zixuan had been appointed as adjutant of the Black Armored Army had long been spread. At first, the soldiers of the Black Armored Army were talking about it for a long time. However, due to various reasons, Li Zixuan had not been appointed to the Black Armored Army. After a long time, the soldiers of the Black Armored Army gradually forgot about this matter. Today, after hearing Li Zixuan's intention, the two guards could not help but recall the news from more than a month ago. They were surprised. Your subordinate, Lu Xingwu, is from Jianzhou. Jianzhou was also badly affected by the locusts in Guangzhou. Fortunately, Sir Adjunct's Sky Pheasant Brigade provided timely relief. Most of the fertile land in Jianzhou was saved. Sir Adjunct, please accept my bow. At this time, one of the shorter guards bowed solemnly to Li Zixuan, saluting him. Li Zixuan's heart skipped a beat. He didn't expect to meet someone he had helped in this place. He smiled and said, "You don't have to be so polite. The one who saved the people of Jin Province was His Majesty, not me. If you want to thank someone, you should thank His Majesty." This was a political issue. Li Zixuan did not want to carry too much popularity among the people. He was familiar with ancient history and knew that in this feudal era, keeping a low profile was the way to go. Yes, yes, yes. It's all thanks to your Majesty's wisdom. Lu Xingwu was very tactful and quickly bowed in the direction of the palace when he heard this. Time was of the essence. Li Zixuan didn't want to waste too much time outside the gate, so he said, "Lu Xingwu, these carriages are filled with the new weapons and armor that I have created for the soldiers. Quickly lead a group of people, and come over to transport the weapons and armor. I still have to enter the camp to pay my respects to General Duan." When Lu Xingwu heard Li Zixuan calling his name, he couldn't help but feel energized. He quickly cupped his fists and said loudly, "Your subordinate obeys." Li Zixuan nodded and led Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin directly through the gate and into the depths of the camp. Lu Xingwu and Yuqi Baolin didn't have time to ask about Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin's identities. From their point of view, since Li Zixuan was a member of the Black Armored Army, he definitely knew the rules of the Black Armored Army. He definitely wouldn't bring an unrelated outsider into the Black Armored Army's camp. What the two of them were concerned about now was to get people to transport the weapons and armor. "These are all the weapons and armor that General Duan made for us? So many?" The soldier beside Lu Xingwu looked at the endless carriages in front of the gate and couldn't help but swallow his saliva. "Aren't you talking nonsense? Quickly go in and get some brothers to move them. These are all good stuff." When Lu Xingwu heard this, he bumped the soldier's arm and said unhappily, "More than half a month ago, Li Zixuan wore vanadium steel plate armor and wielded a vanadium steel sword to duel with Duan Zixuan on the drill ground. In the end, he completely crushed Duan Zixuan with his superior equipment. That duel caused quite a stir in the army. The generals and soldiers of the 12 capital guards all coveted the new weapons and armor that Li Zixuan used that day. The soldiers of the Black Armored Army also raised their heads in anticipation of the new weapons and armor that Li Zixuan had created. At this moment, Lu Xingwu looked at the carriages in front of him and was so excited that his voice trembled slightly. "Good. Xingwu, you stay here and watch. I'll go get people." The other guard responded, then immediately turned and ran through the gate. "General Li Zixuan greets the great general. Greetings to General Qiu." After the announcement, Li Zixuan walked in with Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin. Duan Zixuan and Qiu Xingong were in the tent, so he cupped his fists and greeted the two. Although his status outside was not lower than the two in front of him, he was in the army right now and had to look at military rank and experience. Where there were people, there would be Jianghu. In the army, one had to follow the rules of the army. "Greetings to the great general. Greetings to General Qiu." It was rare for Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin to not be mischievous at this time. Instead, they followed behind Li Zixuan and imitated him by bowing respectfully to Duan Zixuan, and Qiu Xing. Duan Zixuan was the great general of the Black Armored Army and was in charge of military affairs. Qiu Xinggong was the deputy general and only had the title of general, only below Duan Zixuan. According to the military system of the Great Tang, under the great general and general, there would be the assistant commander, 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 and so on. Since you have entered the Black Armored Army, you are my brothers. No need to be so polite. Duan Zixuan nodded slightly to Li Zixuan and the other two. Qiu Xinggong's tiger-like eyes swept over Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin. He did not speak, and no emotions could be seen on his weathered face. Duan Zixuan continued, Qing Chumo, Yuqi Baolin, the two of you are both descendants of generals. You should know better than anyone else that you should abide by military rules in the army. Go and change into your uniforms. In a while, when the soldiers are called out, you are not allowed to be late. Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin trembled and immediately cupped their fists. Understood. Although the two of them were always joking around outside, their fathers were both generals in the army. Under their influence, they naturally knew that the military rules were strict. As such, they did not dare to hesitate or smile at Duan Zixuan's orders. Colonel Li, I know that you have a special identity and a lot of responsibilities. Yesterday, His Majesty gave you permission to set up personal guards in the Black Armored Army to protect yourself. Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin will be under your command as your personal guards. After Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin left, Duan Zixuan looked at Li Zixuan and said in a low voice. Li Zixuan already knew about the personal guards. When he heard this, he cupped his fists and said, Thank you, great general. Qiu Xinggong couldn't help but snort. The atmosphere in the tent suddenly became tense. Qiu Xinggong cupped his fists casually at Duan Zixuan and said, General Duan, it's time to call out the soldiers. I will go to the drill ground first. With that, he turned and left without waiting for Duan Zixuan's permission. Chapter 1726. The morning breeze blew gently, and the sun rose from the east. At this moment, there was already a touch of red on the horizon. Most people had probably just woken up. On the drill ground in the northwest of Chang'an City, there was already a black mass of soldiers standing. When Li Zixuan followed Duan Zixuan to the stage, he saw such a magnificent scene of soldiers on the battlefield. What entered his eyes was that all the soldiers had their heads held high and their chests puffed out. Like a pine tree, they stood upright on the drill ground. Although there were many of them, they were not in disorder. The distance between each person was the same, neat and tidy, not moving at all. This scene reminded Li Zixuan of the military parade of his motherland that he had seen on television in his previous life. Steel lions, just like heavenly soldiers. No wonder they were the strongest cavalry of the Tang Empire. With just one look, Li Zixuan could feel the strength of the army in front of him. Although this Black Armored Army had only been formed for a few months, they already had an imposing aura. Reporting to the great general, other than the 20 men from the D Battalion who are transporting equipment outside the gate, the soldiers of the other 5 battalions have all arrived at the drill ground. No one is late. Seeing Duan Zixuan arrive, a tall and straight young soldier quickly walked forward and saluted Duan Zixuan with his fists clasped. Return to your ranks. Duan Zixuan nodded and said, Yes. The young soldier replied and quickly retreated to the front of the troops on the left side of the stage. At this moment, Duan Zixuan walked to the front of the stage and scanned the entire drill ground with his tiger-like eyes. He stood with his hands behind his back, looking dignified even though he was not angry. After a moment of silence, he finally opened his mouth. All soldiers listen to my order, at ease. Duan Zixuan's first sentence surprised Li Zixuan. What the hell was at ease? Wasn't this a movement that only existed in the modern army? Was Duan Zhishuan still sleeping and talking in his sleep? But what he did not expect was that as soon as Duan Zhishuan finished speaking, the 5,000 soldiers on the drill ground all neatly took half a step forward with their left foot and made a at ease gesture. Their movements were uniform and extremely precise. Of course, it was not absolutely uniform. There were two people at the back of the line who were slower by half a beat. Li Zishuan's sharp eyes recognized them immediately. Who else could they be but Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin? These two fellows had participated in the military training of the academy, so it was impossible that they did not know the basic military movements such as at ease and at ease. The reason why they were slower by half a beat was probably because they did not expect the Black Armored Army to use of the academy's training. Fortunately, Duan Zhishuan knew that they were new to the Black Armored Army, so he pretended not to see the two discordant factors and continued speaking. It has been nearly 2 months since the expansion of the Black Armored Army. As the most elite cavalry of the Great Tang, His Majesty has always placed high hopes on the Black Armored Army. However, the Black Armored Army's current strength is not worthy of His Majesty's high hopes. Fortunately, the Black Armored Army's adjutant has finally arrived to take up his post. As for who our adjutant is, I'm sure all of you have heard of him before. Adjutant Li, come and greet the soldiers. Although Duan Zhishuan did not shout at the top of his lungs, his voice could be heard in every corner of the drill ground. All 5,000 soldiers heard his words clearly. When they heard Duan Zhishuan say that the Black Armored Army's adjutant had finally arrived to take up his post, everyone could not help but look at the young general behind Duan Zhishuan. He was so young, but he had already become a legend of the Great Tang. Chapter 1727. At the Black Armored Army's camp. On the stage, Duan Zhishuan had been silently observing Li Zishuan. He saw that not only did Li Zishuan not have stage fright in front of 5,000 black armored soldiers for the first time, he even managed to ignite the soldiers' passion with just a few words. Duan Zhishuan couldn't help but nod in his heart. As a general, not only did he have to be good at leading soldiers into battle, he also had to be good at controlling people's hearts and arousing their fighting spirit. Otherwise, he could only be considered a boorish fellow and definitely not a talented general. Li Zishuan had done well in this aspect. Haha. Sweat more in normal times and bleed less in times of war. Duan Zhishuan took a step forward and walked to Li Zishuan's side. He faced the soldiers below the stage and said loudly, "All of you have heard Adjunct Li's words. His Majesty has always placed great importance on the Black Armored Army. This time, Adjunct Li has given the first batch of new equipment to the Black Armored Army. Under such circumstances, if you still can't form a strong fighting force within 2 months, you will have let down His Majesty, Adjunct Li, and even more so, your parents and wives." At this point, Duan Zhishuan's fierce eyes scanned the crowd. Perhaps the ordinary soldiers didn't know how valuable the equipment Li Zishuan had brought today were. However, as an important official of the imperial court and the leader of the Black Armored Army, how could he not know how valuable this batch of equipment was? Not to mention other things, even the generals of the 12 capital guards almost fought over this equipment. If not for Li Zishuan supporting the Black Armored Army, the moment Li Zishuan entered Chang'an City, more than 100 carriages of equipment would have been divided among them. After pausing for a moment, Duan Zhishuan's gaze turned serious and he said loudly, "All generals, listen up. From today onwards, Adjunct Li will be in charge of the daily drill of the Black Armored Army. His orders are military orders and my orders. No one, no matter what position they hold, is allowed to disobey. Do you all understand?" As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers on the drill ground were pleasantly surprised. They had not expected Li Zixuan to be entrusted with such an important task by Duan Zixuan as soon as he joined the Black Armored Troop. He had directly taken on the daily training of the Black Armored Troop. Not only were they shocked, Qiu Xingong was even more shocked. However, a trace of anger flashed across Qiu Xingong's face. At this moment, he couldn't care less about the fact that there were so many soldiers on the drill ground. He walked 5 steps in front of Duan Zixuan and cupped his fist. General Duan, Adjunct Li has just been appointed and is not familiar with the military affairs of the Black Armored Army. Furthermore, Adjunct Li has never led soldiers before. How can we let him take over the military affairs of the Black Armored Army? Black Armored Army's camp. On the stage, Duan Zixuan had been silently observing Li Zixuan. He saw that not only did Li Zixuan not have stage fright in front of 5,000 Black Armored troops for the first time, he even managed to ignite the soldiers' passion with just a few words. Duan Zixuan couldn't help but nod in his heart. As a general, not only did he have to be adept at leading soldiers into battle, he also had to be adept at controlling people's hearts and arousing their fighting spirit. Otherwise, he could only be considered a brute and definitely not a talented general. Li Zixuan had done well in this aspect. Haha. Sweat more during normal times so that you can bleed less during wartime. Duan Zixuan took a step forward and walked to Li Zixuan's side. He faced the soldiers below the stage and said loudly, "All of you have heard Adjunct Li's words. His Majesty has always placed great importance on the Black Armored Army. This time, Adjunct Li has given the first batch of new equipment to the Black Armored Army. Under such circumstances, if you still can't form a strong fighting force within 2 months, you will have let down His Majesty, Adjunct Li, and your parents and wives." Chapter 1728. While the Black Armored Army was doing a roll call, the morning court was being held in Chang'an City's Taiji Palace. Li Er sat on the dragon throne. After listening to a few officials reporting some trivial matters, his eyes focused and he said in a deep voice, "Dear officials, I received an urgent report yesterday. Xieli has gathered a large number of troops to encircle and annihilate Tuli's troop. Tuli Khan has asked me for help urgently. He wants the Tang Empire to send troops to help him resist Xieli." It was unknown if it was true or if Li Er was just making things up. Anyway, as soon as he said that, all the officials in the imperial court were in an uproar. The hall was filled with buzzing sounds, and it was a bit like a market. Qing Yaojin and Qin Xiong closed their eyes and pretended to be in deep thought. They did not say a word because they were present when Li Zixuan proposed the plan to Li Er. Today, when Li Er said this, these 2 experienced old generals could guess what Li Er was going to say next. "Your Majesty, I think that the imperial court should send troops to help Tuli. Otherwise, after Xieli unifies the grassland, the next one to attack may be our Tang Empire. The imperial court cannot sit back and watch Xieli expand in the grassland." Fang Xianling stood out and bowed to Li Er. Old Fang had followed Li Er to fight in the north and south in the early years. Old Fang was definitely experienced in judging the war situation. "I second the motion. Now that the Turks and the Tang Empire are like fire and water, at such a critical moment, we cannot let Xieli unify the grassland. The imperial court should send troops to help Tuli." Zhang Sunwuji also stood out and bowed to Li Er. After Zhang Sunwuji, some other officials and generals also stood out and seconded the motion. Li Jing also came to the morning court today. Unexpectedly, he actually stood out and objected, "Your Majesty, I think that it is not appropriate for the Tang Empire to send troops now." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was shocked. No one had expected that Li Jing, the war god of the Great Tang, would actually stand out to oppose when everyone was united against a common enemy and unanimously wanted to suppress the Turks. This was truly a little inconceivable. Li Er's gaze focused. He looked at Li Jing and asked, "Oh? What does apothecary mean? Li Jing cupped his fists and said, Your Majesty, it has only been a little more than a month since the Tang Empire began to prepare for war. The 400,000 soldiers, horses, and provisions needed to attack the Tujue have yet to be fully prepared. How can we recklessly declare war on Xieli? Marching into the grassland will not be the same as pacifying the rebellion in the Great Tang's territory a few years ago. When the time comes, the army's provisions and supplies will become incomparably difficult due to the distance. This old subject believes that at this time, whether it is the provisions and supplies or the preparation of the various armies, it is not advisable to shed all pretense of cordiality with Xieli and rashly start a war. Fang Xianling, Zhangsun Wuji, and the others could not help but frown. Although they agreed to send out troops, they had to admit that Li Jing's words made sense. It was indeed not the best time to start a war with the Turks. Medicine Master's words are reasonable. At present, my great Tang has just experienced the plague of locusts and is not yet ready to start a full-scale war with Xieli. At this moment, Li Er opened his mouth. However, he immediately changed the topic and said, But the imperial court can't just sit by and watch Xieli unify the grasslands and strengthen his strength. Therefore, I've decided to send an envoy with a batch of provisions into the grasslands to assist Tuli Khan in resisting Xieli. I just don't know who is willing to go. The moment Li Er finished speaking, Taiji Palace immediately fell silent. Chapter 1729. Inside the Taiji Palace. After Xiao Yu's suggestion, a hint of worry flashed across the faces of the officials in the palace. A war was not only a test of a country's military strength. At the same time, it was also a huge test of a country's economic strength. After all, war required money. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a saying in history that they were all militaristic. Li Er smiled and said, Minister Xiao, you don't have to worry about money and provisions. I already have a foolproof plan. I will not let these 150,000 soldiers drag down the national treasury. Don't be fooled by Li Er's solemn vow and full confidence. In fact, he was very uncertain in his heart. No one knew if the national donation plan that Li Zishuan had suggested to him yesterday would work or not. If it worked, then everything would be fine. If it did not work, then the finances of the imperial court might not be able to support it. This was a very risky decision. Using this kind of decision without full confidence was not in line with Li Er's style of doing things. However, the current situation showed that Xieli had the intention to speed up the war between the Tang Empire and the Turks. If the Tang Empire wanted to have a higher chance of winning, the imperial court had to prepare more elite soldiers and strong generals. Li Er had to take the risk. He could only hope that Li Zishuan's plan would work. Xiao Yu was slightly stunned. As the Minister of Revenue, he was in charge of the country's purse. Even he could not think of a good idea to break the situation. How could Li Er think of it? Therefore, old Xiao asked Li Er curiously, May I ask what exactly is your Majesty's foolproof plan? Li Er's expression was slightly sluggish but quickly returned to normal. He waved his hand and said, There is no need to say more about this. Within 3 days, Minister Xiao will definitely see money and provisions flowing into the national treasury. But Xiao Yu was very dissatisfied with Li Er's ambiguous answer. He was about to ask again when Li Er interrupted him. No buts. After the court is dismissed, the Secretariat will immediately draft an edict and announce to the world. The edict orders all states to immediately select 150,000 elite soldiers and rush to Chang'an within a month. At that time, the imperial court will send a few generals to personally command these soldiers. Hearing Li Er's resolute words, Xiao Yu and the other officials did not dare to continue asking about this matter. Zhangsun Wuji stepped forward and cupped his hands. This old official obeys the edict. The Secretariat was in charge of formulating policies and drafting edict. At this moment, Zhang Sun Wuji was not only the Minister of Rites, he was also in charge of the Secretariat. Yes. Li Er nodded and said, "If there is nothing else, then the court is dismissed. Minister Tang, stay behind. This subject obeys the decree." Tang Jian bowed and accepted the order. After the morning assembly dispersed, the civil and military officials returned to their homes. Tang Jian came to the sweet nectar hall under the lead of the chamberlain. He had yet to bow when Li Er laughed and waved his hand, saying, Her, there are no outsiders here. Mao Yu, you don't have to be so courteous. Come, give him a seat." Tang Jian was flattered. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Right this moment, a chamberlain brought a stool over. Tang Jian sat down cautiously. Li Er spoke bluntly. "This time I sent Mao Yu as a diplomatic envoy to the Tujue. It was indeed Zhen's last resort. Xieli's power is already great, now he wants to annex Tuli's troops. It can be said that he has the ambition of a wolf. How can Zhen let him fulfill his wish easily? However, Zhen knows that the journey to the Tujue will be filled with difficulties and dangers. Mao Yu, if you have any misgivings, Zhen can withdraw the decree now and send someone else instead." It was said that a monarch's words were not joking. Generally, it was impossible for the emperor to take back what he had said. Now that Li Er said this to Tang Jian, whether it was sincere or just putting on an act, it was very rare and precious. When Tang Jian found out that Li Er wanted him to be a diplomatic envoy to the Tujue in the morning assembly, he still had some misgivings and unhappiness in his heart. After all, he was now a duke. Now that he was suddenly sent to such a dangerous place like the Tujue, it was impossible for him not to have any thoughts in his heart. However, with Li Er's words, the misgivings and unhappiness in his heart instantly vanished into thin air. It was really not easy for an emperor to do this for his subject. "This subject thanks Your Majesty for your consideration." Tang Jian hurriedly got up and bowed to Li Er with a moved expression. "However, since this subject has already agreed to this mission of being a diplomatic envoy to the Tujue, there is no reason for me to back down. Now that the country is in danger, this old subject receives the country's salary and should share the country's worries. Even if the Tujue is now in a mountain of blades and a sea of flames, this old subject will not turn back. Tang Jian has met a wise ruler like Your Majesty in this life. Even if I die, I will have no regrets." After saying that, Tang Jian straightened his back. His face was full of righteousness, awe-inspiring and fearless. Li Er was horrified and moved. He hurriedly got up and personally walked down to hold Tang Jian's arm. Good. Zhen really did not misjudge you. Mao Yu, you really did not disappoint Zhen." Chapter 1730. Little Xian, I didn't expect this plate armor to fit so well. It's also so light and agile. I thought it would be heavy and cumbersome at first. No wonder my father wanted it so much. In the black armored army's camp, Li Zishuan distributed the weapons, plate armor, and horse armor to the soldiers according to the roster. At around 9 in the morning, the soldiers were all wearing the new armor. Qing Chumo was wearing a shiny plate armor, and he ran to Li Zishuan to show off. This fellow and Yuqi Bao Lin were both temporary recruits to the black armored army. Logically speaking, the two of them didn't have a share in this batch of armor made by the workshop for the black armored army. However, there were always exceptions. These two brothers had special identities, and it wasn't a problem for them to gather 2 sets of armor at the last minute. As a matter of fact, Lu Xingwu and Zhang Debao, the 2 guards who were standing guard in front of the gate in the morning, had lent their armors to Qing Chumo. Needless to say, the 2 guards' physiques were about the same as Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin's, so the armors fit the 2 brothers quite well. Li Zishuan had sent someone to the workshop to have them make 2 more sets of armors according to Lu Xingwu and Zhang Debao's measurement. With the workshop's current production speed, It would probably take less than 2 days for the 2 sets of armors to be sent over. Li Zixuan looked up and down at Qing Chumo, who was tightly wrapped in vanadium steel patches. He nodded and said, "Yes. Looks good. Chonyo, have you and Bao Lin's tents been arranged?" It's all arranged." Yuchi Bao Lin walked over in his plate armor and replied, "Yamacho, Brother Chonyo and I have been arranged to be in the same tent in the Wu battalion." This child was originally stronger than others. After putting on the plate armor, he was simply like a moving iron tower. He was completely a walking tank, making people feel intimidated just by looking at him. Although they were in the military camp, Yuchi Baolin was still used to calling Li Zixuan Yamacho. He was different from Qing Chumo. Qing Chumo was the first friend Li Zixuan made after returning to Chang'an City. Therefore, most of the time, Qing Chumo treated Li Zixuan as a friend and brother. Yuchi Baolin, on the other hand, respected Li Zixuan more. This was because he admired Li Zixuan both in terms of knowledge and martial arts. That's good." Li Zixuan nodded and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Qing Yaojin and Yuchi Jingda had assigned Qing Chumo and Yuchi Baolin to the black armored troops respectively. This was both a form of protection for Li Zixuan and also a form of trust. Li Zixuan felt that at the very least, he could not let his brothers suffer in the military. Otherwise, how could he be the big brother of this small group? That, Xiao Xian." Qing Chumo scratched his head, as if he wanted to say something. Li Zixuan said angrily, "If you have something to say, just say it. Since when did you become such a shy little girl?" Yuchi Baolin almost burst out laughing when he heard that. Qing Chumo blushed and said angrily, What little girl? You're the one who's acting like a little girl. I wanted to ask you, can Bao Lin and I stay in the same tent as you? It's too cramped for 10 people to stay in one tent. Also, 2 of our brothers' big feet are too smelly." At this time, the black armored troops camp was built in a military camp in the northwest of the imperial city. The soldiers usually stayed in tents and not houses. This way, they could recreate the situation of war to the greatest extent and allow the soldiers to be in a state of combat readiness at all times. Of course, with the current resources, it was impossible for every soldier to stay in a tent alone. Normally, 10 soldiers would share a tent. This was even more cramped than Yanhuang College's dormitory. The higher-ranked generals would stay in their own tent. Li Zixuan was the black armored troops' adjutant. Moreover, he had many identities and duties outside. This time, he had even brought a telegraph with him when he joined the black armored troop. Therefore, he also had his own tent. That was why Qing Chumo wanted to come over and sleep there. Li Zixuan glanced at Qing Chumo and said angrily, "Your smelly feet aren't any better, are they? I've heard about it from Qin Ke and the others. How dare you look down on others?" In Yanhuang College's dormitory 001, Qing Chumo's big feet were the most smelly. They could be used as poison gas bombs. Last year, Li Tai had complained to Li Zixuan about it many times in private. However, under the compulsion of the other dormitory members, Qing Chumo had developed the good habit of washing his feet frequently. Chapter 1731. What's wrong? Li Kanjun, you've been watching for so long. Have you seen anything? The Black Armored Army's camp. At this moment, the soldiers were training in full swing. Li Zixuan was also seriously observing the training of the soldiers on the drill ground. He mainly wanted to understand more about the training methods of the soldiers of this era. After all, the military books that Li Jing gave him were only written descriptions. Things like the art of war had to be combined with theory and practice. Just as he was reading with relish, a sonorous and powerful voice exploded in his ears. He couldn't help but be startled. Turning his head to look, he saw that it was his old enemy Qiu Xingong who had walked over without him noticing. Li Zixuan couldn't help but squint his eyes. He thought to himself that this old man didn't come with good intentions. Previously, this old man had humiliated him in front of Duan Jishuan. Now that Duan Jishuan wasn't around, would this old man do something out of line? Although this was what he thought, Li Zishuan wasn't afraid of Qiu Xingong at all. He would deal with whatever came his way. In front of so many people, what could this old man do to him? Speaking of which, Li Zishuan wasn't a pushover either. If they were to fight one-on-one, Qiu Xingong might not be able to defeat him. So it's General Qiu. Li Zishuan clasped his fists towards Qiu Xingong with a fake smile, and then said, "This junior has just entered the military camp and has never had any experience in the military. I only looked at it for a short while, how could I possibly see anything?" Qiu Xingong was stunned at first. He probably didn't expect Li Zishuan to be so carefree and admit his inadequacies. After a while, he grinned and said, I didn't expect Li Kanjun to be so self-aware. This is a good thing. The Black Armored Army's camp isn't like the Imperial Court. It's also not something your Yanwang College can compare to. You can be a fish in water in the Imperial Court and be a competent Yamacho in the Academy. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can be a qualified Black Armored Army conscript. When the old man saw Li Zishuan's humble attitude, he took advantage of his seniority to take advantage of the situation. Li Zishuan resisted the urge to ridicule him and said, "General Qiu has fought alongside His Majesty for many years. Your experience and knowledge are naturally much richer than this junior's. This junior also knows that my ability is limited, and I'm not sure if I can be a good commander. If General Qiu has the time and can impart some of your experience to this junior will naturally be very grateful." What? Li Kanjun, you've been observing for so long. The Black Armored Army's camp. At this moment, the soldiers were training in full swing. Li Zishuan was also seriously observing the training of the soldiers on the drill grounds. He mainly wanted to understand more about the training methods of the soldiers of this era. After all, the military books that Li Jing gave him were only written descriptions. Things like the art of war had to be combined with theory and practice. Just as he was reading with relish, a sonorous and powerful voice exploded in his ears. He couldn't help but be startled. Turning his head to look, he saw that it was his old enemy Qiu Xingong who had walked over without him noticing. Li Zishuan couldn't help but squint. He thought to himself that this old man didn't come with good intentions. Previously, this old man had humiliated him in front of Duan Jishuan. Now that Duan Jishuan wasn't here, would this old man do something out of line? Although this was what he thought, Li Zishuan wasn't afraid of Qiu Xingong at all. He would deal with whatever came his way. In front of so many people, what could this old man do to him? Speaking of which, Li Zishuan wasn't a pushover. If they really fought one-on-one, Qiu Xingong might not be able to beat him. So it's General Qiu. Li Zishuan put on a fake smile and clasped his fist towards Qiu Xingong. He then said, "This junior has just entered the military camp and has never had any experience in the military. I've only observed for a short while. How could I have seen anything?" Qiu Xingong was stunned at first. He probably didn't expect Li Zishuan to be so carefree and admit his inadequacies directly. After being stunned for a moment, he smiled and said, I didn't expect you to be so self-aware. This is a good thing. The Black Armored Army's camp isn't like the Imperial Court. It's also not something your Yanwang College can compare to. You can be a fish in water in the Imperial Court, gain the Emperor's favor, and be a competent Yamacho in the Academy. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can be a qualified general in the Black Armored Army. When the old man saw Li Zishuan's humble attitude, he took advantage of his seniority to flaunt his seniority. Li Zishuan resisted the urge to ridicule him and said, "General Qiu has fought alongside His Majesty for many years. Your experience and knowledge are naturally much richer than this junior's. This junior also knows that my ability is limited, and I'm not sure if I can do a good job in the army. If General Chiu has the time and can teach this junior some experience, this junior will naturally be very grateful. Heh. What? You've been watching for so long, Li Zishuan, have you seen anything? The Black Armored Army's camp. At this moment, the soldiers were training in full swing. Li Zishuan was also seriously observing the training of the soldiers on the drill ground. He mainly wanted to understand more about the training methods of the soldiers of this era. After all, the military books that Li Jing gave him were only written descriptions. Things like the art of war had to be combined with theory and practice. Just as he was reading with relish, a sonorous and powerful voice exploded in his ears. He couldn't help but be startled. Turning his head to look, he saw that it was his old enemy Qiu Xingong who had walked over without him noticing. Li Zishuan couldn't help but squint his eyes. He thought to himself that this old man didn't come with good intentions. This old man had previously humiliated him in front of Duan Zhishuan. Now that Duan Zhishuan wasn't here, would this old man do something out of line? Although this was what he thought, Li Zishuan wasn't afraid of Qiu Xingong at all. He would deal with whatever came his way. In front of so many people, what could this old man do to him? Speaking of which, he, Li Zishuan, wasn't a pushover either. If they really fought one-on-one, Qiu Xingong might not be able to beat him. So it's General Qiu. Li Zishuan smiled insincerely and cupped his fists towards Qiu Xingong. He then said, "This junior has just entered the military camp and has never had any experience in the military. I've only watched for a short while, how could I have seen anything?" Qiu Xingong was stunned at first. He probably didn't expect Li Zishuan to be so carefree and admit his inadequacies directly. After being stunned for a moment, he smiled and said, I didn't expect General Li to be so self-aware. This is a good thing. The Black Armored Army's camp isn't like the Imperial Court. It's also not something your Yanwang College can compare to. You can be a fish in water in the Imperial Court, gain the Emperor's favor, and be a competent Yamacho in the Academy. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can be a qualified general in the Black Armored Army. Seeing Li Zishuan's humble attitude, this old man took advantage of his seniority to flaunt his seniority. Li Zishuan resisted the urge to ridicule him and said, "General Qiu has fought alongside His Majesty for many years. Your experience and knowledge are naturally much richer than this junior. This junior also knows that my abilities are limited, and I'm not sure if I can be a good general in the military. If General Qiu has the time and can impart some experience to me, this junior will be very grateful." What? General Li has been watching for so long, have you seen anything? The Black Armored Army's camp. At this moment, the soldiers were training in full swing. Li Zishuan was also seriously observing the training of the soldiers on the drill ground. He mainly wanted to understand more about the training methods of the soldiers of this era. After all, the military books that Li Jing gave him were only written descriptions. Things like the art of war had to be combined with theory and practice. Just as he was reading with relish, a sonorous and powerful voice exploded in his ears. He couldn't help but be startled. Turning his head to look, he saw that it was his old enemy Qiu Xingong who had walked over without him noticing. Li Zishuan couldn't help but squint his eyes. He thought to himself that this old man didn't come with good intentions. This old man had previously humiliated him in front of Duan Zhishuan. Now that Duan Zhishuan wasn't here, would this old man do something out of line? Although this was what he thought, Li Zishuan wasn't afraid of Qiu Xingong at all. He would deal with whatever came his way. In front of so many people, what could this old man do to him? Speaking of which, he, Li Zishuan, wasn't a pushover either. If they really fought one-on-one, Qiu Xingong might not be able to beat him. So it's General Qiu. Li Zixuan put on a fake smile and clasped his fists towards Qiu Xingong. He then said, "This junior has just entered the military camp and has never had any military experience. I've only watched for a short while, how could I have seen anything?" Qiu Xingong was stunned at first. He probably didn't expect Li Zixuan to be so carefree and admit his inadequacies directly. After being stunned for a moment, he smiled and said, "Heh? I didn't expect you to be so self-aware. This is a good thing. The Black Armored Army's camp isn't like the Imperial Court. It's also not something your Yanwang College can compare to. You can be a fish in water in the Imperial Court and gain the Emperor's favor. You can be a competent Yamacho in the Academy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can be a qualified general in the Black Armored Army." Seeing Li Zixuan's humble attitude, this old man took advantage of his seniority to flaunt his seniority. Li Zixuan resisted the urge to ridicule him and said, "General Qiu has fought alongside His Majesty for many years. Your experience and knowledge are naturally much richer than mine. I also know that my abilities are limited, and I'm not sure if I can be a good general in the army. If General Qiu has the time and can impart some of your experience to me, I will be very grateful." "Heh? Why? You've been watching for so long, Li Zixuan, have you seen anything?" The Black Armored Army's camp. At this moment, the soldiers were training in full swing. Li Zixuan was also seriously observing the training of the soldiers on the drill ground. He mainly wanted to understand more about the training methods of the soldiers of this era. After all, the military books that Li Jing gave him were only written descriptions. Things like the art of war had to be combined with theory and practice. Just as he was reading with relish, a sonorous and powerful voice exploded in his ears. He couldn't help but be startled. Turning his head to look, he saw that it was his old enemy Qiu Xingong who had walked over without him noticing. Li Zixuan couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He thought to himself that this old man didn't come with good intentions. Previously, this old man had humiliated him in front of Duan Zixuan. Now that Duan Zixuan wasn't here, would this old man do something out of line? Although that was what he thought, Li Zixuan wasn't afraid of Qiu Xingong at all. He would deal with whatever came his way. In front of so many people, what could this old man do to him? Speaking of which, he, Li Zixuan, wasn't a pushover either. If they really fought one-on-one, Qiu Xingong might not be able to defeat him. So it's General Qiu. Li Zixuan put on a fake smile and clasped his fists towards Qiu Xingong. He then said, "This junior has just entered the military camp and has never had any military experience. I've only watched for a short while. How could I have seen anything?" Qiu Xingong was stunned at first. He probably didn't expect Li Zixuan to be so carefree and admit his inadequacies directly. After being stunned for a moment, he grinned and said, "Heh? I didn't expect you to be so self-aware. This is a good thing. The Black Armored Army's camp isn't like the Imperial Court. It's also not something your Yanwang College can compare to. You can be a fish in water in the Imperial Court, gain the Emperor's favor, and be a competent Yamacho in the Academy. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can be a qualified general in the Black Armored Army." Seeing Li Zixuan's humble attitude, this old man took advantage of his seniority to take advantage of the situation. Li Zixuan resisted the urge to ridicule him and said, "General Qiu has fought alongside His Majesty for many years. Your experience and knowledge are naturally much richer than this junior. This junior also knows that my abilities are limited, and I'm not sure if I can be a good general. If General Qiu has the time and can impart some of your experience to me, this junior will be very grateful." "Heh? What? You've been watching for so long, Li Zixuan, have you seen anything?" The Black Armored Army's camp. At this moment, the soldiers were training in full swing. Li Zixuan was also seriously observing the training of the soldiers on the drill ground. He mainly wanted to understand more about the training methods of the soldiers of this era. After all, the military books that Li Jing gave him were only written descriptions. Things like the art of war had to be combined with theory and practice. Just as he was reading with relish, a sonorous and powerful voice exploded in his ears. He couldn't help but be startled. Turning his head to look, he saw that it was his old enemy Qiu Xingong who had walked over without him noticing. Li Zixuan couldn't help but squint his eyes. He thought to himself that this old man didn't come with good intentions. This old man had previously humiliated him in front of Duan Zixuan. Now that Duan Zixuan wasn't here, would this old man do something out of line? Although that was what he thought, Li Zixuan wasn't afraid of Qiu Xingong at all. He would deal with whatever came his way. In front of so many people, what could this old man do to him? Speaking of which, he, Li Zixuan, wasn't a pushover either. If they really fought one-on-one, Qiu Xingong might not be able to beat him. So it's General Qiu. Li Zixuan put on a fake smile and clasped his fists towards Qiu Xingong. He then said, "This junior has just entered the military camp and has never had any military experience. I've only watched for a short while, how could I have seen anything?" Qiu Xingong was stunned at first. He probably didn't expect Li Zixuan to be so carefree and admit his inadequacies directly. After being stunned for a moment, he grinned and said, I didn't expect Colonel Li to be so self-aware. This is a good thing. The Black Armored Army's camp isn't comparable to the Imperial Court. It's also not something that Yen Wang College can compare to. You can be a fish in water in the Imperial Court, obtain the Emperor's favor, and be a competent Yamacho in the Academy. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can be a qualified colonel in the Black Armored Army. Seeing Li Zixuan's humble attitude, this old man took advantage of his seniority to flaunt his seniority. Li Zixuan resisted the urge to ridicule him and said, "General Qiu has fought alongside His Majesty for many years. Naturally, your experience and knowledge are much richer than this junior's. This junior also knows that my abilities are limited, and I'm not sure if I can be a good colonel. If General Qiu has the time and can impart some of your experience to me, this junior will be very grateful." Chapter 1732. Currently, the Black Armored Army is divided into 5 battalions. A, B, C, D, and E respectively. They are located at the east, west, south, and north corners of the drill ground, as well as the center. Each battalion has 1,000 people. Lieutenant Zhang Shigui of the A Battalion is at the peak of the Qi stage. He has been in the army for 11 years. Back then, he fought alongside His Majesty against Wang Shichong and Dou Jianda. He is one of the oldest generals in the Black Armored Army. Lieutenant Zhang Kangyan of the C Battalion has been in the army for 7 years. Lieutenant Liu De of the D Battalion has been in the army for 7 years. Lieutenant Sun Jiping of the E Battalion has been in the army for 3 years. He just joined the Black Armored Army not long ago and is the only new recruit among the 5 Black Armored Army captains. Sun Jiping was originally a general in the Northern Imperial Army. He has outstanding military achievements and is good at commanding troops. At such a young age, he has already reached the peak of the Qi stage. He has great potential. In the Black Armored Army's main camp, Duan Zixuan brought Li Zixuan around the drill ground to inspect the 5 battalions. As he inspected them, he explained to Li Zixuan, "Zhang Shigui? Sun Jiping?" When Li Zixuan heard Duan Zixuan's explanation, he couldn't help but be surprised. Out of the 5 names that Duan Zixuan mentioned, 2 of them were Li Zixuan. They were Zhang Shigui and Sun Jiping. There was no need to talk about Zhang Shigui. Those who had watched the TV series, The Legend of Shuirenge, would know that there was a villain in the Tang Dynasty named Zhang Shigui. He was jealous of his subordinates' achievements and framed the famous general Shuirenge. Cough, cough. In truth, this was just the novel vilifying Zhang Shigui's mission. In the official history books, Zhang Shigui was actually a famous general of the Great Tang, a founding general of the Great Tang. His military exploits were illustrious. Moreover, he knew people well, loved his soldiers, had a keen political insight, and was skilled in both civil and martial arts. He could definitely be called a famous general of his generation, completely different from the unofficial history books. Zhang Shigui joined the army at a young age and joined Li Yuan at the end of the Sui dynasty. Later, he gradually mingled with Li Er. When Li Er established the Black Armored Army, Zhang Shigui was one of the first Black Armored Army generals. His personal strength was not bad, but in that era of famous generals, his edge was completely overshadowed by Qin Xiong, Yuqi Jingde, Qing Yaojin, and the other exceptional generals. It was to the extent that he was still only a mid-level general in the Black Armored Army, while Qing Yaojin, Yuqi Jingde, and the others had become great generals of one of the 12 guards of the capital. Li Zixuan never thought that he would meet someone like Zhang Shigui in the Black Armored Army's camp. He could not help but take a few more glances at Zhang Shigui. If meeting Zhang Shigui was a surprise, to Li Zixuan, meeting Sun Jiping in the Black Armored Army's camp was a pleasant surprise. Sun Jiping used to be a subordinate of Dugu Xian and held the position of a military officer in the Northern Yamen Imperial Army. Last year, when Li Zixuan led the army to besiege the Snake Spirit Mountain, the main force was the Northern Yamen Imperial Army. To a certain extent, Sun Jiping could be considered as a comrade who had fought side by side with Li Zixuan. In that battle, many Imperial Army soldiers were killed or injured, but Sun Jiping was lucky enough to survive. After returning to the capital, Sun Jiping was promoted to the position of a general in the Northern Yamen Imperial Army because of his military exploit. It was because of his participation in that battle that Sun Jiping's attitude towards Li Zixuan became extremely respectful. Although Li Zixuan was young, he was a man who had annihilated a mountain sect and avenged his fellow soldiers. He was worthy of Sun Jiping's respect for the rest of his life. Furthermore, when Cui Yunhan had led the students from the Hongwen school to besiege the Li Zixuan, it was Sun Jiping who had led the troops to rescue Li Zixuan. Li Zixuan would never have thought that he would meet Sun Jiping in the Black Armored Army. Moreover, Sun Jiping had even become a lieutenant. He was very curious as to how Duan Zixuan had managed to poach Sun Jiping from the Imperial Army. However, all these were not important. The most important thing was that he had finally met an old acquaintance in the Black Armored Army. This was really not easy. Why? Have you heard of these two people before? Duan Zixuan asked curiously when he saw Li Zixuan's reaction. Cough cough. I've heard of them, of course I've heard of them. Li Zixuan coughed dryly and quickly changed the topic. This Black Armored Army is really filled with talented people. Duan Zixuan did not suspect anything and nodded. That's right. The soldiers in the Black Armored Army are all elites from the various armies. It is because they are all elite soldiers that His Majesty was able to defeat Wang Shichong's army of 100,000 with just 3,000 Black Armored Army during the crucial battle in Luoyang. Li Zixuan could not help but nod his head. Sometimes quality was more important than quantity. It was the same principle as the special forces of the modern era. Those who could become special forces were the kings of soldiers. If such people were to form a group of elite soldiers, they would be like a sharp sword on the battlefield. They would often be able to achieve unexpected results. Half a month ago, His Majesty ordered the 12 military guards to step up their training. All the soldiers are urgently preparing for battle. As the Black Armored Army has just been expanded and His Majesty has high hopes for them, the training pressure on the Black Armored Army is undoubtedly the greatest. Now that Li Zixuan has come to the barracks, I hope that you can integrate into the Black Armored Army as soon as possible so that the Black Armored Army can become a fighting force as soon as possible. Duan Zhishuan suddenly sighed and said faintly. Li Zishuan clasped his fist and said, "It is my duty to do so. Let me bring you to continue watching." Duan Zhishuan nodded and pointed to a group of soldiers who were training on the drill ground. He said, "Ever since His Majesty led the officials to Yanhuang College to watch your military training ceremony last year, the various barracks in the capital have gradually begun to implement your formation training method. It is not difficult and has some similarities with the previous training methods in the barrack. You saw it when the soldiers gathered on the drill ground this morning. They stood in neat formation. However, the Black Armored Army is still cavalry. The focus of our training is on their horse skills." After listening to Duan Zhishuan's explanation, Li Zishuan couldn't help but feel enlightened. With a face full of approval, he said, "Great General, you're right. Posture and formation are only the basics of military training. It's only to allow the soldiers to maintain better spirit and a more orderly formation. In a war, it's more about the individual qualities of the soldiers. I believe that the Black Armored Army's training will focus on two aspects. First, it is to train the soldiers' physical fitness. The Black Armored Army is a heavy cavalry. All the soldiers wear armor and armor. In war, it is very taxing on their physical fitness. We must ensure that all the soldiers have sufficient physical fitness. Second, it is to cultivate the rapport between the soldiers and their horses. The horses are the cavalry's second life on the battlefield. Only when the two work together can the advantages of the cavalry be maximized." "Ha! Not bad, not bad." In such a short period of time, Li Zishuan was able to understand these 2 points. This is already very commendable. Next, I can rest assured that the training of the Black Armored Army will be handed over to you," Duan Zhishuan said with a face full of praise. Chapter 1733. This is my first time in military affairs, and there are many things I do not understand. I hope that General will enlighten me when the time comes. After conversing with Duan Zhishuan, Li Zishuan was enlightened. At the very least, he had a rough plan for the training of the Black Armored Troop. As for the details, he would need to use Li Jing's Mirror of 6 Armies, and the training methods of modern soldiers to supplement and perfect it. Kiki. Of course, of course. Duan Zhishuan smiled knowingly and replied, "HM? Great General, what are the soldiers of the A Battalion doing? Are they preparing for the equestrian archery training?" Coincidentally, at this moment, the formation of the 1st Battalion dispersed. The soldiers brought out war horses from the stables and came to the drill ground. 1 man and 1 horse. Very quickly, more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 1,000 war horses once again formed a neat square formation. Seeing this scene, Li Zishuan couldn't help but ask in confusion. Duan Zhishuan looked towards the direction of the voice and smiled. "Kiki?" "Yes and no." Li Zishuan narrowed his eyes and asked, "General, what do you mean?" Seeing Li Zishuan humbly asking for advice, Duan Zhishuan patiently explained, "The Black Armored Troops are cavalry. Other than physical training, they also have equestrian training. However, to use the horses they have to train them first. Although horses understand humans, they are still beasts. In order to make the horse more receptive to the intentions of the soldiers, and to make the horse's strength a useful drain, the soldiers should be allowed to develop a tacit understanding and affection with the horse, so that the man and the horse can become one. This is not an easy task and requires meticulous and patient training of the horses. Therefore, under normal circumstances, before the Black Armored Troops carry out their equestrian archery training, the soldiers must have some intimate interactions with their war horses. For example, caressing them, scratching them, washing them, providing them with clean water, and feeding them fresh fodder. This is to increase the bond between the soldiers and their war horses. Only then can the cavalry unleash their full potential on the battlefield. Li Zishuan was enlightened when he heard this. I see. Just now, I said that I would increase the rapport between the soldiers and the horses in future training. I did not expect that the black armored troops had already used this training method. I am ashamed. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the wisdom of the ancients. This general is new to military affairs, so there are still many things I don't understand. When the time comes, I hope that the general will not be stingy with his guidance. After talking to Duan Zhishuan, Li Zishuan was enlightened. At the very least, he had a rough plan for the training of the black armored troops. As for the details, he would need to use Li Jing's Mirror of 6 Armies and the training methods of modern soldiers to supplement and perfect it. Haha. Well said, well said. Duan Zhishuan smiled knowingly and agreed. Great General, what are the soldiers of the A Battalion doing? Are you preparing for equestrian archery training? At this moment, the formation of the A Battalion dispersed. The soldiers brought out war horses from the stables and came to the drill ground. 1 man and 1 horse. Very quickly, more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 1,000 war horses once again formed a neat square formation. Seeing this scene, Li Zishuan couldn't help but ask in confusion. Duan Zhishuan followed the voice and looked over. Stroking his beard, he said with a smile, Yes and no. Li Zishuan narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but ask, Great General, what do you mean? Seeing that Li Zishuan was humbly asking for advice, Duan Zhishuan patiently explained, the black armored troops are cavalry. Other than physical training, they also have equestrian training. However, to use the horses, they must first train them. Although horses understand humans, they are still beasts. In order to make the horse more receptive to the intentions of the soldiers, and to make the horse's strength a useful drain, the soldiers should be allowed to develop a tacit understanding and affection with the horse, so that the man and the horse can become one. This is not an easy task. It requires meticulous and patient training of the horses. Therefore, under normal circumstances, before the black armored troops carry out equestrian archery training, the soldiers must interact with their war horses intimately. For example, caressing, scratching, washing, providing clean water, and feeding fresh grass to strengthen the bond between the soldiers and their war horses. Only then can the cavalry unleash their greatest combat prowess on the battlefield. Hearing this, Li Zishuan was enlightened. So that's the case. Just now, I said that in the future training, we should increase the tacit understanding between the soldiers and the horses. I didn't expect that the black armored troops had already used this training method. I'm ashamed. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the wisdom of the ancients. For the Tang Dynasty to be able to have such power in this era, I'm new to the military and there are many things I don't understand. When the time comes, I hope that the great general will enlighten me. After conversing with Duan Zhishuan, Li Zishuan was enlightened. At the very least, he had a rough plan for the future training of the black armored troop. As for the details, he needed to combine it with Li Jing's Mirror of 6 Armies and the training methods of modern soldiers to supplement and perfect it. Haha. Sure. Duan Zhishuan smiled knowingly and replied. Great General, what are the soldiers of the A Battalion doing? Are they preparing for equestrian archery training? Coincidentally, at this moment, the formation of the 1st Battalion dispersed. The soldiers brought out war horses from the stables and came to the drill ground. 1 man and 1 horse. Very quickly, more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 1,000 war horses once again formed a neat square formation. Seeing this scene, Li Zishuan couldn't help but ask in confusion. Duan Zhishuan looked towards the direction of the voice and stroked his beard. Haha. Yes and no. Li Zishuan's eyes narrowed and he couldn't help but ask, Great General, what do you mean? Seeing that Li Zishuan was humbly asking for advice, Duan Zhishuan patiently explained, the black armored troops are cavalry. Other than physical training, they also have equestrian training. However, to use the horses, they must first train them. Although horses understand humans, they are still beasts. In order to make the horse more receptive to the intentions of the soldiers, and to make the horse's strength a useful drain, the soldiers should be allowed to develop a tacit understanding and affection with the horse, so that the man and the horse can become one. To do this, it is not easy. It requires meticulous and patient training of the horses. Therefore, under normal circumstances, before the black armored troops carry out equestrian archery training, the soldiers must interact with their war horses intimately. For example, caressing, scratching, washing, providing clean water, and feeding fresh grass to strengthen the bond between the soldiers and their war horses. Only then can the cavalry unleash their greatest combat prowess on the battlefield. Hearing this, Li Zishuan was enlightened. So that's the case. Just now, I said that in the future training, we should increase the tacit understanding between the soldiers and their horses. I didn't expect that the black armored troops had already used this training method. I'm ashamed. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the wisdom of the ancients. For the Tang Dynasty to be able to have such a great military force in this era, there are still many things that I don't understand. When the time comes, I hope that the great general will enlighten me. After conversing with Duan Zhishuan, Li Zishuan was enlightened. At the very least, he had a rough plan for the future training of the black armored troop. As for the details, he would need to use Li Jing's Mirror of Six Armies and the training methods of modern soldiers to supplement and perfect it. Of course. Duan Zhishuan smiled knowingly and replied, "HM? Great General, what are the soldiers of the A Battalion doing? Are they preparing for equestrian archery training?" Coincidentally, at this moment, the formation of the A Battalion dispersed. The soldiers brought out war horses from the stables and came to the drill ground. 1 man and 1 horse. Very quickly, more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 1,000 war horses once again formed a neat square formation. Seeing this scene, Li Zishuan couldn't help but ask in confusion. Duan Zhishuan looked towards the direction of the voice and smiled. Yes and no. Li Zishuan narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but ask, "What does the great general mean?" Seeing that Li Zishuan was humbly asking for advice, Duan Zhishuan patiently explained, "The black armored troops are cavalry. Other than physical training, they also have equestrian training. However, in order to use the horses, they must first train the horses. Even though horses understand humans, they are still beasts. In order to make the horse more receptive to the intentions of the soldiers, and to make the horse's strength a useful drain, the soldiers should be allowed to develop a tacit understanding and affection with the horse, so that the man and the horse can become one. This is not an easy task and requires meticulous and patient training of the horses. Therefore, under normal circumstances, before the black armored troops carry out equestrian archery training, the soldiers must interact with their war horses intimately. For example, caressing, scratching, washing, providing clean water, and feeding fresh grass to strengthen the bond between the soldiers and their war horses. Only then can the cavalry unleash their greatest combat prowess on the battlefield. Hearing this, Li Zishuan was enlightened. So that's how it is. Just now, I said that in the future training, I would increase the content of developing a tacit understanding between the soldiers and the horses. I didn't expect the black armored troops to have already used this training method. I'm ashamed. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the wisdom of the ancients. For the Tang Dynasty to be able to have such a great military force in this era, there are still many things that I don't understand. When the time comes, I hope that the Grand General will enlighten me. After conversing with Duan Zhishuan, Li Zishuan was enlightened. At the very least, he had a rough plan for the black armored troops' future training. As for the details, he would need to use Li Jing's Mirror of Six Armies and the training methods of modern soldiers to supplement and perfect it. Of course, of course. Duan Jishuan smiled knowingly and replied. Grand General, what are the soldiers of the A Battalion doing? Are they preparing for equestrian archery training? Coincidentally, at this moment, the formation of the 1st Battalion dispersed. The soldiers brought out war horses from the stables and came to the drill ground. 1 man and 1 horse. Very quickly, more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 1,000 war horses once again formed a neat square formation. Seeing this scene, Li Zishuan couldn't help but ask in confusion. Duan Jishuan looked towards the direction of the voice and smiled. Yes and no. Li Zishuan narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but ask, what does the Grand General mean? Seeing that Li Zishuan was humbly seeking advice, Duan Jishuan patiently explained, the Black Armored Army is a cavalry unit. Other than physical training, the soldiers also have horsemanship training. However, in order to use a horse, they must first train the horse. Although horses understand humans, they are still beasts. In order to make them accept the intentions of the soldiers and use the strength of the horses effectively, the soldiers and the horses have to develop a tacit understanding and relationship. This was not an easy task. It required a lot of meticulous and patient training of the warhorse. Therefore, under normal circumstances, before the black armored troops carry out their equestrian archery training, the soldiers must have some intimate interactions with their war horses. For example, caressing them, scratching them, washing them, providing them with clean water, and feeding them fresh fodder. This is to increase the bond between the soldiers and their war horses. Only then can the cavalry unleash their full potential on the battlefield. Hearing this, Li Zishuan was enlightened. So that's the case. Just now I said that in the future training, we should increase the tacit understanding between the soldiers and the horses. I didn't expect the black armored troops to have already used this training method. I'm ashamed. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the wisdom of the ancients. For the Tang Dynasty to be able to have such power in this era, I'm new to the military and there are many things I don't understand. When the time comes, I hope the Grand General can enlighten me. After conversing with Duan Jishuan, Li Zishuan was enlightened. At the very least, he had a rough plan for the future training of the black armored troop. As for the details, he would need to use Li Jing's mirror of 6 armies and the training methods of modern soldiers to supplement and perfect it. Sure. Duan Jishuan smiled knowingly and replied. Grand General, what are the soldiers of the A Battalion doing? Are they preparing for equestrian archery training? At this moment, the formation of the A Battalion dispersed. The soldiers brought out war horses from the stables and came to the drill ground. 1 man and 1 horse. Very quickly, more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 1,000 war horses once again formed a neat square formation. Seeing this scene, Li Zishuan couldn't help but ask in confusion. Duan Jishuan looked towards the direction of the voice and stroked his beard. Yes and no. Li Zishuan narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but ask, Grand General, what do you mean? Seeing that Li Zishuan was humbly asking for advice, Duan Jishuan patiently explained, the black armored troops are cavalry. Other than physical training, they also have equestrian training. However, to use the horses they have to train them first. Although horses understand humans, they are still beasts. In order to make the horse more receptive to the intentions of the soldiers, and to make the horse's strength a useful drain, the soldiers should be allowed to develop a tacit understanding and affection with the horse, so that the man and the horse can become one. To do this, it is not easy. It requires meticulous and patient training of the war horses. Hence, under normal circumstances, before the black armored troops undergo equestrian archery training, the soldiers have to interact with their war horses intimately. For example, caressing, scratching, washing, providing clean water and feeding fresh grass to increase the bond between the soldiers and the war horses. On the battlefield, Only then can the cavalry unleash their full potential. Li Zishuan heard this and was enlightened. So that's how it is. Just now I said that in the future training, I would increase the content of developing a tacit understanding between the soldiers and the war horses. I didn't expect that the black armored troops had already used this training method. I'm ashamed. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the wisdom of the ancients. Chapter 1734. Qiu Xingong was originally inspecting the training of the soldiers in 2nd Battalion. Before Li Zishuan came to the barracks, he was in charge of the daily training of the Black Armored Army. Just now, one of his personal guards suddenly came to report that Li Zishuan was going to display his archery skills on the drill ground. Qiu Xingong was instantly energized. Li Zishuan's master was spiritual master Ling Su and his martial arts were superb. This was something that the entire Chang'an city and even the entire world knew. However, at the same time, everyone also knew that Li Zishuan's weapon of choice was the sword and not the bow. One had to know that there were many types of bows. The horn bow used by the Black Armored Army was completely different from the bow used by the common people. Even though Li Zishuan had used a bow before, it was impossible for him to adapt and familiarize himself with the special horn bow in the army in such a short period of time. Therefore, Li Zishuan's archery skills demonstration this time was undoubtedly a humiliation to Qiu Xingong. How could he miss such a good show? It's not a demonstration. It's just that I have never used a bow before. Now that I have joined the Black Armored Army, I should at least learn the art of equestrian archery. Therefore, I asked someone to bring me a bow to give it a try. Li Zishuan had lived 2 lifetimes. Although he wasn't considered to be a sophisticated person, his emotional intelligence was definitely not bad. How could he not see that Qiu Xingong wanted to see him make a fool out of himself? However, after all, he had never used a bow before and he wasn't sure how he would perform later. Therefore, he didn't boast. He didn't like to show off something that he wasn't confident in. Haha. You are too humble, Instructor Li. Qiu Xingong walked to Li Zishuan and said with a fake smile, in the entire Chang'an city, who doesn't know that Instructor Li is the son of an immortal and has unparalleled martial arts? Why would you be stumped by a mere bow? Oh, this is a 3-stone bow? TSK. Instructor Li's arm strength is indeed amazing. It was this old man who couldn't help but click his tongue and sigh when he saw the horn bow that one of Duan Zhishuan's personal guards handed to Li Zishuan. In the Tang Dynasty, 1 stone was equivalent to 106 caddies in modern times. Hence, a 3-stone bow would require an arm strength of more than 300 caddies to draw. To most people, this requirement was quite high. To most people in modern times who were in suboptimal health all year round, an arm strength of more than 300 caddies was simply unattainable. However, to those who practiced martial arts, it was not difficult, especially for a martial arts master like Li Zishuan. In addition, when the soldiers of the Tang Dynasty joined the army, there was usually a hard condition, and that was that they had to be able to draw at least 1 stone bow. General Qiu has been through hundreds of battles and your archery skills are unparalleled. Why are you making fun of me? Li Zishuan couldn't be bothered to pay any attention to Qiu Xingong, this yin-yang man. He pulled out an arrow from the quiver on the back of the soldier beside him. On the other side, there was naturally a soldier who had set up a target 300 zhang away from Li Zishuan. 300 feet, 100 meters, 100 steps away. This distance wasn't far, but it wasn't close either. The maximum range of an ancient bow was about 200 meters, and its effective range was only about 100 meters. Chonyo, look! What is Yamacho doing? On the other side, at the training ground of the Wu Battalion, Yuchi Baolin, who had just finished his military formation training and was taking a short break, saw a group of people surrounding Li Zishuan in the middle of the training ground. He hurriedly pushed Ching Chumo's arm and pointed in Li Zixuan's direction. What? Ching Chumo didn't react at first, but when he looked at where Yuchi Baolin was pointing, he was shocked. What the F***ck? Why is Xiao Xian holding a bow? Is he going to compete with someone in archery? I've never heard of him using a bow before. Archery? Yamacho knows how to use a bow? Hearing this, Yuchi Baolin was also puzzled. It was true that he worshipped Li Zixuan, but an outstanding archer had to go through many years of practice. Could it be that Li Zixuan had been practicing archery for a long time? Let's go. Let's go and take a look. Ching Chumo waved his hand and said. But what if the lieutenant wants us to gather for training later? Although Yuchi Baolin wanted to go and take a look, he hesitated when he remembered that this was a military camp and he had to follow the military rules. Are you stupid? Let's just go for a while. And didn't you see that Lieutenant Sun is also there? Let's go quickly. Ching Chumo patted Yuchi Baolin's arm in disappointment. Coincidentally, the lieutenant of the Wu Battalion, Sun Jiping, was also walking towards Li Zixuan. Sun Jiping's eyes suddenly lit up, and without saying anything, he dragged Yuchi Baolin and ran towards Li Zixuan. This is my first time shooting an arrow, please don't laugh at me. On the other side, Li Zixuan took a deep breath and said to Duan Zixuan and Qiu Xingong who were beside him. Then he took 2 steps back and stood still. He knocked an arrow and focused all his energy on the arrow. At this moment, his eyes were only focused on the center of the target that was 300 feet away. During this short period of time, there were already quite a number of soldiers who had noticed the commotion. Those who had training missions only dared to sneak a peek at Li Zixuan's side. Soldiers like the Wu Battalion who happened to be taking a half-time break came closer, wanting to see how good Li Zixuan's archery skills were. After all, before Li Zixuan entered the Black Armored Army, he was already a famous figure in the great Tang Empire. Now that he was about to show off his archery skills, how could the soldiers not be curious? Qiu Xingong, on the other hand, was secretly laughing in his heart. Because from Li Zixuan's action of drawing the bow and knocking the arrow just now, Li Zixuan was definitely a complete novice in archery. It was hard to say if such a novice could even hit the target at such a distance, let alone the center of the target. At this moment, Qiu Xingong really hoped that all the soldiers in the army would come over to take a look. If that happened, Li Zixuan would definitely become the laughing stock of the soldiers. He might even be too ashamed to continue staying in the Black Armored Army. On the other hand, Duan Zixuan's heart sank. Obviously, he could also see that Li Zixuan's archery was a little unfamiliar. Initially, he only wanted to see how good Li Zixuan's archery skills were. But after Qiu Xingong came, the nature of the situation changed completely. If Li Zixuan didn't perform well, Qiu Xingong could use this as an excuse to suppress Li Zixuan's reputation in the Black Armored Army. But now, the arrow was already knocked on the bow and had to be released. Even if Duan Zixuan wanted to stop it, he couldn't. He could only wait and see. Li Zixuan, who was in the eye of the storm, didn't have the slightest bit of worry like Duan Zixuan. At this moment, his eyes were only on the target and his heart was only on the arrow. He had already felt the weight of the arrow and the force of the angle bow when he was knocking the arrow. At this moment, he was using his powerful mental strength and knowledge of physics and mathematics to deduce and calculate the trajectory and landing point of the arrow in the air. In the eyes of others, there was only Li Zixuan knocking the arrow and the target in the distance. But in Li Zixuan's world, there were many invisible parabola lines between the arrow and the target. Different force and angle of release corresponded to different trajectories and landing points. A simple engineering student could easily deduce the trajectory and landing point of an arrow with a known speed and angle of release, but unfortunately, this engineering student couldn't pull the bow. A strong martial artist could easily pull the three-stone bow, but when he tried to shoot the arrow for the first time, he would definitely not be able to hit the target 300 feet away. This was because he lacked experience and couldn't calculate the landing point of the arrow. And Li Zixuan happened to be the perfect combination of the two. He was an engineering otaku with excellent martial arts skills. It's done. This is the force and the angle. Although it was a complicated process to deduce and calculate the trajectory and landing point of the arrow, for Li Zixuan, who had powerful mental strength, it only took him a few breaths to complete. Soon, he found a perfect parabola among the many invisible trajectories of the arrow. With a whoosh, the arrow that left the bowstring made a whistling sound as it flew rapidly toward the target 300 feet away. At this moment, everyone's hearts were in their throats. Qiu Xingong was already prepared to burst into laughter, while Duan Zixuan had a serious look on his face. He was already thinking about how he could help Li Zixuan out of this predicament later. Qing Chumo and Yuchi Baolin just happened to arrive at this moment. The two of them could only look at the arrow that had left the bowstring and pray in their hearts that it would definitely hit the target. Bang! A distance of 300 feet was nothing more than a blink of an eye for the arrow that had been shot out. Under everyone's gaze, the arrow hit the target hard and made a dull sound. It hit the target! It hit the target! Yuchi Baolin couldn't help but exclaim excitedly. What a pity that it almost hit the bullseye. Qing Chumo said regretfully as the arrow hit the fourth ring. Most of the archery targets in the Tang Dynasty only had 5 rings, which was different from modern times. It was only a few inches away from the bullseye of the 5th ring. On the other side, the smile on Qiu Xingong's face suddenly froze. Although the arrow did not hit the bullseye, it was still very close to the bullseye. One had to know that this was Li Zixuan's first time shooting an arrow. It was definitely not embarrassing to have such a result. One had to know that in the Black Armored Army, it was extremely rare for someone to be able to hit the bullseye from 300 feet away. At first, he thought that Li Zixuan would definitely miss the target on his first try. But now, with such an ending, how could he still smile? Ah, good, good. Qiu Xingong was stunned, but Duan Zixuan was happy. He was stunned for a while before he could not help but clap his hands and laugh. Adjunct Li can hit the bullseye from 300 feet away on his first try. Such talent is really rare. What? This is Adjunct Li's first time shooting an arrow? When the surrounding soldiers who came to watch the fun heard Duan Zixuan say that this was Li Zixuan's first time shooting an arrow, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Just now, they only thought that Li Zixuan hitting the 4th ring of the target from such a long distance was already very good, but after hearing Duan Zixuan's words, how good was this? It was simply a monster. Who could shoot an arrow so accurately on their first try? Alas! What a miscalculation! I actually neglected the wind speed. What a pity! The crowd around him exclaimed in surprise, but our main character didn't seem to have heard the praises and exclamations from the audience. At first, he was disappointed because according to his calculations, this arrow should have hit the bullseye perfectly. But now, he only hit the 4th ring. Of course, he was disappointed. After being disappointed, he tried to find the reason. He squatted down and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he understood and could not help but murmur. At the beginning, he had considered the speed, angle, and gravity of the arrow, but he had neglected the wind speed. Fortunately, the distance between him and the target was not long, and the speed of the arrow was fast enough. Otherwise, if he missed the target by a millimeter or 1,000 miles, his arrow might have missed the target directly. If that happened, it would be a joke. HM? What? Li Zixuan's voice was too soft, so Duan Zixuan did not hear it clearly. However, he could feel the regret in Li Zixuan's voice. Li Zixuan stood up and cupped his fists towards Duan Zixuan. When this general was shooting the arrow, I neglected the wind speed, so I did not hit the bullseye. This general wants to try again. I hope that the Grand General will allow it. Adjunct Li wants to try again? Duan Zhishuan was shocked when he heard this, but at the same time, he was also a little troubled. Who knew if Li Zishuan's arrow was a fluke, or if the next arrow would miss the target? Right. You should shoot a few more times. Archery is very dependent on luck. Qiu Xingong's eyes lit up as he hurriedly agreed. Obviously, this old man thought that Li Zishuan's first arrow was purely luck. If he tried a few more times, he would definitely not be so lucky. As for Li Zishuan's claim that his first arrow did not hit the bullseye because he neglected the wind speed, Qiu Xingong felt that it was completely boasting. The young man did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, and did not know when to stop. He had to pay the price. Alright. Then Adjunct Li will try again. Duan Zhishuan's face darkened. After hearing Qiu Xingong's words, he had to agree even if he did not want to. Thank you, Grand General. Li Zishuan cupped his fists and then smiled at Qiu Xingong. Then, without wasting any time, he squatted down and picked up a handful of grass. Then, he released his hand and the grass fell with the wind. Southeast wind 3.5 meters per second. Soon, Li Zishuan estimated the current wind speed. Then, he directly took out an arrow from the quiver on the soldier's back. His powerful spiritual power began to move. Countless invisible lines appeared before his eyes. This time, the lines were different from the previous ones. There was an additional correction of wind speed compensation. It should be about time. Soon, Li Zishuan finished his deduction and calculation. He chose the best shooting angle and speed, and the arrow was shot out again. With a whoosh, there was a sonic boom in the air. Everyone held their breaths and stared at the arrow that left the bowstring. At this time, Li Zishuan looked away. This was because when the arrow was in midair, he was already sure that this arrow would hit the bullseye. He did not stop and quickly took out another arrow. Using the same speed and angle as before, he shot the arrow again. In this way, 3 arrows were shot consecutively. Bang bang bang. Li Zishuan's hand movements were as fast as lightning. The arrow's speed in the air was also as fast as lightning. Soon, the 3 arrows hit the target and made 3 sounds of impact. It hit. 3 consecutive arrows all hit the bullseye. Duan Zhishuan's eyes were fixed on the target. When the 3rd arrow hit the bullseye, he suddenly looked as if he had seen a ghost and could not help but exclaim. At the center of the bullseye, 3 arrows hit the bullseye one after the other. Moreover, the arrow at the back just happened to hit the arrow in front. In other words, all 3 arrows hit the same spot. This level of archery was simply amazing. The scene fell into a dead silence. However, after the silence, there was madness. Everyone was shocked. These 3 consecutive arrows all hit the bullseye? And all 3 arrows hit the same spot. How is this possible? Instructor Li's archery is amazing. All hail Instructor Li. The surrounding soldiers could not help but exclaim. At this time, Qiu Xingong's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He could not understand how Li Zishuan could hit the bullseye with all 3 arrows on his first try. He originally wanted to use this opportunity to attack Li Zishuan's reputation in the Black Armored Army. However, who knew that in the end, he went for wool and came home shorn. Chapter 1735. Good. On the training ground, Qiu Xingong's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Duan Zhishuan, on the other hand, was in a good mood. He clapped his hands and laughed. I didn't expect Adjunct Li to be so talented in archery. Haha. General Qiu, what do you think of Adjunct Li's archery skills? As he finished speaking, Duan Zhishuan glanced at Qiu Xingong with a spurious smile. Earlier, Qiu Xingong wanted to humiliate Li Zishuan at every turn, so wasn't that the same as slapping Duan Zhishuan's face? It was impossible for Duan Zhishuan to not be unhappy. Now that Li Zixuan had exceeded everyone's expectations, not only did he not embarrass himself, he even made a name for himself with these 3 arrows. Duan Zixuan obviously wanted to counterattack Qiu Xingong. Hearing that, Qiu Xingong instantly felt as if he had eaten feces. His old face flushed red, and after a moment of stuttering, he finally opened his mouth and said, adjunctly, "It's your first time shooting, and you're already so accurate. Of course, you're talented. Cough cough, but on the battlefield, there won't be such a dead target standing there for others to shoot at. So, adjunctly needs to practice diligently in the future." After saying this, Qiu Xingong felt that he couldn't stay here any longer and wanted to find an excuse to leave. However, he saw that there were already quite a number of black armored army soldiers surrounding him. He rolled his eyes and immediately shouted, "What are you all doing here? Don't you think the training mission is heavy enough? Get back to your training." "Yes, General Qiu." When the soldiers saw Qiu Xingong's expression, they knew that this old fellow was not in a good mood right now. Thus, they hurriedly responded and scattered like birds, returning to their respective camps for training. "Let's go. Let's go back to training." Even Ching Chumo and Yuchi Baolin didn't dare to provoke Qiu Xingong at this time. Ching Chumo saw Li Zixuan's prowess just now and wanted to talk to Li Zixuan for a while. Hearing this, he could only yell and leave with Yuchi Baolin. As the lieutenant of the V camp, Sun Jiping naturally had no reason to stay. He cupped his fist towards Li Zixuan and left without caring if Li Zixuan could see him. "General Duan, the A camp hasn't been patrolled yet. I won't keep you company." Qiu Xingong's expression became slightly better when he saw that the soldiers had dispersed. He cupped his fists towards Duan Zixuan and said indifferently. Duan Zixuan nodded and said, "Zixuan, Duan, General." "Yes." Only then did Qiu Xingong turn and leave. Only Li Zixuan, Duan Zixuan, and 2 of Duan Zixuan's personal guards were left in the temporary shooting range that had been quite lively just a moment ago. Li Zixuan returned the bow to one of the personal guards, then went up to Duan Zixuan and said, "This general was just interested in testing the bows in the army. I didn't expect to cause such a big commotion and attract General Qiu and the other generals here. This is truly a crime." Duan Zixuan laughed and said, "Haha, no worries. There are some people who want to see you make a fool of yourself. Even if you didn't call them over, they would have come by themselves. You can't be blamed for this." Although Duan Zixuan didn't mention any names, everyone knew who the person who wanted to see Li Zixuan make a fool of himself was. Li Zixuan's expression was normal and he didn't say anything. Duan Zixuan could say that about Qiu Xingong, but he couldn't. No matter what, Qiu Xingong's position in the Black Armored Army was higher than his. Whether it was in the ancient times or modern times, it wasn't good to criticize one's superior in front of others. Seeing that Li Zixuan didn't say anything, Duan Zixuan looked at him with admiration and took the initiative to say, "Instructor Li, you should be more familiar with the Black Armored Army now, right? I still have things to do. Instructor Li, you can walk around by yourself." He only wanted to bring Li Zixuan to familiarize himself with the Black Armored Army. He didn't expect to cause so much trouble. Li Zixuan clasped his fist and said, "Thank you, Grand General." Duan Zixuan waved his hand and left. Li Zixuan thought for a while, and then walked towards the training square of the Wu Battalion. When he was doing the roll call in the morning, he didn't notice that the lieutenant of the Black Armored Army's Wu Battalion was Sun Jiping. After all, there were so many people and he couldn't see how everyone looked like. However, when Sun Jiping clasped his fist and bowed to him, he had already noticed it. Since he met someone he knew here, he naturally wanted to meet him. No matter what, they would be colleagues in the future. Every unit is bringing people to the stables to get their horses and bows. Next, we will begin the equestrian archery training. Same rules, before noon, those who fail 3 tests are not allowed to eat lunch. Do you hear me? Li Zixuan had just arrived near the square of the Wu battalion when he heard Sun Jiping lecturing the soldiers. His voice was loud and clear, and his tone was serious. He had the dignity of a general. He couldn't help but praise Sun Jiping in his heart. It seemed that this Sun Jiping had some talent as a general. Yes, sir. The soldiers were already used to this. It was obvious that they had been through this before. Hearing Sun Jiping's words, they responded loudly. Qing Chumo and Yuqi Baolin were completely dumbfounded. They had just joined the Black Armored Army today, and didn't know what the equestrian archery assessment was. They had to undergo such a harsh punishment. If they failed the assessment, wouldn't they not be able to eat lunch? Then how would they train in the afternoon? Lieutenant Sun, Baolin and I have to take the assessment too? The soldiers dispersed in all directions. Qing Chumo walked up to Sun Jiping unwillingly and asked anxiously. Sun Jiping frowned and said with a serious face, regardless of the background of the soldiers in the Black Armored Army, once they enter the camp, they will be treated the same. Although the 2 of you have just joined the Black Armored Army today, there will be no exceptions for the assessment. If you fail the assessment, you will still be punished. In the Wu battalion, if you want to eat, you have to train hard. Isn't that a little too unfair? Qing Chumo was suddenly dumbfounded. Sun Jiping's words had blocked all his escape routes. He could already foresee that he could only watch others eat at noon while he had to starve. Fair? There is no such thing as fairness in this world. There is only strength. Sun Jiping snorted. He thought for a while and said, however, the 2 of you are from a family of generals and have a strong foundation. As long as you don't slack off during training, the assessment in the Black Armored Army shouldn't be too difficult for you. But no matter what, since the 2 of you have joined the Black Armored Army, the general and I will treat you the same. There is no exception. When the Black Armored Army was expanding and the new recruits just entered the camp, they were all treated the same way. Do you understand? Qing Chumo could only say helplessly, understood. Then why aren't you going to the stables to get the horses? Sun Jiping said indifferently. Yes, sir. Qing Chumo replied and left with Yuqi Baolin. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.